Panic erupts in the stone corridors as servants scream for water to combat the thick smoke filling the air. A frantic maid rushes to Lady Christina's side amidst the chaos, desperately asking if her mistress is unharmed. Confused and shaken, Christina admits she was heading to the library but agrees they must run for their lives immediately. The maid notes that while the upper floor bedrooms are engulfed in flames, the ground floor strangely remains untouched by the fire. As the realization of the strange fire patterns hits her, Christina pauses to worry about the safety of Muriel, her father, and her brother. They rush down the stairs while the maid attempts to reassure a terrified Christina that her family must have already escaped. Christina's mind races, questioning why the bedrooms on the upper floor are burning while the kitchen hazard downstairs is completely safe. Suddenly, her half-sister Muriel appears through the smoke, holding a candle and calling out to her big sister. Relieved to see her safe, Christina listens as Muriel explains that their father told her about a secret passage for emergencies. Muriel urges Christina to escape with her alone, claiming the secret passage is strictly for family members only. Refusing to abandon her loyal servant to the flames, Christina insists she cannot leave Lucine behind. Lucine selflessly pushes her away, insisting that Christina's safety is paramount for the sake of her fiancé, Lord Irol. The maid reminds her that with the wedding only half a year away, the prince's bride cannot be frail or injured. Lucine entrusts Christina to Muriel's care, and with a heavy heart, the sisters turn to leave the servant behind. Glancing back one last time, Christina promises Lucine that they will meet again as she steps into the unknown. Muriel guides her sister into a quiet room lined with bookshelves, far away from the panic of the fire. Pushing open a hidden panel behind the books, Muriel reveals a secret exit that Christina never knew existed. Christina hesitates at the threshold, noting how ominously dark the narrow passage looks inside. Handing her a cloth, Muriel advises Christina to cover her mouth to protect against inhaling any lingering smoke. They navigate the stone tunnel until Muriel stops, pointing ahead to indicate they have finally reached the exit. Christina breathes a sigh of relief and asks about her father and brother, but Muriel sneers and calls her incredibly naive. With a chilling smile, Muriel reveals the horrifying truth that their father and brother have actually been dead for quite a while. Mocking her sister's kindness, Muriel orders a shocked Christina not to move as the trap finally snaps shut. Muriel begins to monologue, describing how the world sees Christina as a perfect, virtuous noble lady with silver hair. Horrified, Christina realizes Muriel poisoned the water and set the fire, a fact her sister gleefully admits while drawing a knife. Muriel explains she panicked when Christina wasn't in her room to drink the sedative-laced water before bed. She declares her plan to murder Christina here and stage it as a suicide committed out of despair after killing the family. Christina tries to argue that the plan is full of holes and lacks motive, but Muriel waves off the logic as nonsense. Spinning a wild tale, Muriel claims the narrative will be that Christina went mad after a commoner lover rejected her. To seal the frame up, Muriel asks how it will look if Christina is found dead clutching a forged love letter to this imaginary man. Muriel holds up the sealed letter, confident that her fabricated story about Christina's suicide will be accepted without question. She dismisses the idea of Lucine interfering, convinced that no one will believe a mere servant over the evidence she has planted. Muriel reveals her true, dark ambition to eliminate everyone in her path and seize absolutely everything Christina possesses. In a bitter monologue, she resents Christina for having everything from birth while she suffered in the shadows of the house for 6 years. Christina tries to reason with her sister, insisting that the family did everything they possibly could to help her integrate. She reminds Muriel that despite being born to a commoner mistress, neither she nor her brother ever treated Muriel differently. Desperate to understand the hatred, Christina asks Muriel exactly what more she could have possibly wanted from them. The question hangs in the air as Christina pleads to know what else she should have done to satisfy her sister's greed. Muriel explodes with jealousy, listing ribbons, dresses, and friends, screaming that she wants every single thing Christina owns. With cold malice, Muriel tells Christina to die because the world has revolved around the perfect sister for far too long. Christina suddenly collapses to the floor, her legs failing her as Muriel gleefully notes the poison has finally taken effect. Realization strikes Christina that the handkerchief Muriel gave her earlier in the tunnel was soaked in a paralytic agent. Drawing a knife, Muriel looms over her helpless sister and vows to marry Lord Irol once Christina is out of the way. She taunts the dying girl with the forged suicide note, confirming she will steal the one person Christina holds most dear. Muriel bids her sister a final, mocking goodbye and brings the weapon down to end her life. A sharp slash cuts through the air, and tears fall from Christina's eyes as the blade connects. Christina narrates her final moments, consumed by regret as her life fades into darkness. The scene shifts abruptly to a peaceful morning with birds chirping in the trees outside the manor window. Christina's eyes snap open in her own bed, and she stares at the ceiling in confusion, wondering why she is alive. Lucine pulls back the curtains and cheerfully wishes her mistress a good morning, oblivious to the previous timeline's horror. Panic sets in as Christina asks about the fire, but a confused Lucine wonders if her lady is feverish or hallucinating. As the familiar surroundings sink in, Christina realizes this is not a dream but a miraculous return to the past. She calculates that she has traveled back 3 years, returning to her 15-year-old self before the tragedy began. Recognizing that Muriel's plan was too complex to be done alone, Christina decides she can no longer play the role of the naive noble lady. She silently vows to protect her father, brother, and fiancé from the murderous plot she now knows is coming. Clenching the bedsheets, she resolves to fight cunning with cunning and selfishness with selfishness as Lucine announces the doctor. Composing herself, Christina graciously thanks Lucine and prepares to face her second chance with a new, hardened heart. She internalizes her new creed, determining to live selfishly to survive the treachery that awaits her. Christina reflects on the absolute authority her father holds within the Duke's household, noting that his word is law. She stares at a family portrait, resolving to remain an obedient daughter for the sake of her late mother and her poor sister Muriel. Her internal monologue reaffirms this commitment to obedience, a vow she intends to keep until the very end. The doctor reassures a worried Lucine that Christina is merely suffering from a fever and simply needs rest to recover. Christina apologizes for causing trouble, but Lucine insists that worrying about her mistress has been her sworn duty since childhood. A wave of sadness hits Christina as she remembers that Lucine had faithfully planned to stay by her side even after marriage in the previous timeline. Lucine senses her distress and demands to know what is wrong, but Christina holds back the truth and claims it is nothing. Needing comfort, Christina quietly asks her loyal maid to stay with her just a little while longer. Lucine happily agrees to stay until she falls asleep and offers her a fresh cup of water. Staring at the cup, Christina realizes it is still intact, whereas in her memories, Muriel had broken it. She realizes with relief that this precious keepsake from her mother has not been destroyed yet in this timeline. The piece is shattered when Muriel bursts into the room, feigning loud concern for her sick sister. Lucine tries to hush the intruder, but Muriel snaps at the maid before Christina instructs them to let her in. Muriel immediately plays the victim, whining that Lucine was mean to her before greeting the awake Christina. Christina observes her own reaction, surprised to find herself completely calm and void of fear or anger toward her murderer. Unsettled by the silence, Muriel asks what is wrong, noting that her sister seems strange. Ignoring the comment, Christina coldly asks Muriel to confirm exactly how old she is right now. Muriel answers she is 13, confirming to Christina that exactly 3 years have passed since she arrived at the duchy. Christina recalls that the head maid, Mary, left last month due to illness, forcing Christina to manage the estate herself. She remembers how she naively believed that working harder for the family would earn her father's approval. Christina then asks why Muriel is unaccompanied, silently suspecting she drove away yet another maid. Muriel deflects the question, complaining that father always blames her for things, playing on Christina's sympathy. Lucine steps in to protect her mistress, suggesting that Muriel should leave so Christina can recover. Muriel agrees to leave but pauses to make a request, which Christina anticipates perfectly before she even speaks. Putting on a sweet face, Muriel asks to wear a purple dress similar to Christina's for the upcoming birthday party. Christina recognizes this exact moment from the past, knowing father would allow it if she agreed, despite the confusion it would cause. Muriel clasps her hands, claiming that matching her sister would make her feel like a true part of the family. She promises to wear a darker shade to highlight Christina's beauty, swearing to let her sister be the star. In the original timeline, Christina thanked her, and Muriel promised to stay quiet and behave. But this time, Christina abruptly shuts her down, ordering her to wear pink instead. Muriel is stunned, but Christina asserts that as a child who hasn't debuted, they must be clearly distinguished. She repeats the command firmly, telling Muriel she is to wear a light pink dress. Muriel tries to manipulate her by crying and questioning if Christina considers her family, but the guilt trip fails. Christina dismisses her cold-heartedly, claiming her fever has returned, while Lucine ushers the girl out. Muriel walks out the door, trembling with shock and rage that her plan has been denied. Christina instructs Lucine to bar the door and let no one in, desperate for a peaceful sleep to recover. She recalls the original timeline's 15th birthday party, where Muriel completely stole the spotlight as the star. In that memory, Christina approaches her sister to wish her a happy birthday, only to be stunned by her appearance. Muriel stands there wearing a violet dress that is the exact same color as Christina's, a major social faux pas. Christina notes that Muriel's dress is flashier and more decorated, while Muriel innocently claims father said it was too late to change. Muriel introduces Christina to the guests as her elder sister, feigning a clumsy mistake to appear cute and harmless. The guests fawn over Muriel while murmuring in surprise that the quiet woman in the corner is the Duke's daughter and Irel's fiancée. Christina hears the whispers and calls out to her brother for support, painfully aware that her high status intimidates others. Reflecting on her past mistake, she realizes she shouldn't have remained humble but should have asserted her position as the star. Back in the present morning, Christina asks Lucine if she was surprised by the refusal of Muriel's request yesterday. Lucine validates the decision, admitting she thought it was right for Christina to finally show some firmness as the elder sister. Empowered, Christina orders Lucine to deliver an urgent letter to the academy, desperate to see Prince Irel immediately. She explains that while the family holds vast lands, they reside in the capital where Irel attends the Noble Academy. Christina declares her intention to stay in her room for the rest of the day to avoid any further disturbances. Suddenly, the door flies open and her father storms in, furious that she allegedly denied Muriel's place in the family. Unflinching, Christina confronts him, demanding to know the meaning of this intrusion without proper etiquette. Her father is taken aback by her silence and cold stare, comparing her chilling demeanor to that of her late mother. Christina stands her ground, reminding him that she is nearly 15 and no longer a child to be barged in upon. Father tries to pivot back to the dress issue, insisting that she and Muriel must match at the upcoming party. He accuses her of giving him orders, but Christina firmly reiterates that even a father should knock before entering a lady's room. Blustering, he shouts that he is the master of the house, but Christina calmly maintains that she is simply making a polite request. She points out the impropriety, noting that had he entered moments later, he might have walked in on her changing clothes. With steel in her voice, she commands him to knock first from now on, establishing a boundary she never dared to before. Internally, she trembles, thinking how pitiful it is that asserting such a basic right requires this much courage. Lucine watches in awe as Christina hides her shaking hands, apologizing for the intrusion into his ego. Father rationalizes her behavior, interpreting her firmness as successful training for becoming the second prince's wife. He decides to overlook her insolence as a sign of maturity, arrogantly conceding that perhaps he was at fault for not knocking. Christina breathes a sigh of relief, celebrating the massive victory of finally standing up to her domineering father. However, Father circles back to the main topic, refusing to let the issue of Muriel's exclusion slide so easily. Christina argues that Muriel is still family regardless of dress color, skillfully dismantling his logic. Father grudgingly accepts this but mutters that matching outfits would still be better, planning to apologize to Muriel later. Seizing the opportunity, Christina feigns excitement and claims to have a brilliant compromise. She enthusiastically suggests that Muriel's dress should match Father's jacket in the same pink color instead. Father agrees to the logic of family matching and leaves, only to realize with horror moments later that he agreed to wear pink. Immediately shifting gears, Christina refuses food to write her letter and warns Lucine to run if she ever feels in danger. Lucine solemnly agrees to the command, accepting the warning with a heavy heart. Christina struggles to compose a letter to Prince Irel, worrying that her words sound awkward and strange given their brief acquaintance. She stares at the paper in frustration, realizing the words she wrote feel wrong and fail to convey her true feelings. Her mind drifts to the past timeline, recalling how Irel departed for a national inspection tour just days before her 15th birthday. He had sent her a magnificent necklace as an apology for his absence, a gesture she treasured despite the distance. Although their union began as a political arrangement, Christina reflects on how grateful she was for his kindness and the bond they shared. She remembers falling in love with him over the years, ever since their engagement when she was 8 and he was 11. The memory of exchanging vows of love with him at 17 warms her heart, confirming that he felt the same way back then. A sudden knock at the door interrupts her thoughts, startling her since she had given orders for no one to enter. Thomas the butler enters with a massive bouquet of flowers, announcing a special delivery for Lady Christina. Lucine and the maids gasp in delight as Thomas reveals the gift is from His Highness, Prince Irel. Thomas adds that the prince wishes to visit her this very evening if she is feeling well enough to receive him. Christina realizes there is no need to send her letter anymore and resolves to tell him the truth about her time travel in person. The entire household springs into action, with maids rushing to prepare the salon and dress Christina for the imminent royal arrival. A flustered maid nearly bumps into the prince as he arrives earlier than expected, seeking audience with the lady of the house. Christina greets Prince Irel in the grand hall, welcoming him with a curtsy despite the abruptness of his arrival. He apologizes for the intrusion, looking dashing in his uniform as he steps into the room. Irel explains that he intended to wait, but upon hearing reports of her illness, he couldn't bear to stay away. He admits that worry drove him to her side, apologizing for troubling her while she is recovering. Irel mentions that his brother has little interest in him, so he felt it best to come see her himself rather than rely on messengers. He pulls her into a gentle embrace, suggesting that perhaps they should appreciate the time they have together more. Christina suggests they have tea in the garden, feeling a profound sense of peace whenever she is near him. They move to the garden gazebo, where Christina thanks him again for the beautiful flowers he sent earlier. The romantic atmosphere is shattered when Muriel comes sprinting toward them, screaming for them to wait. Muriel stomps up to the couple, demanding to know why Christina didn't tell her they had a guest. Christina stares at her sister in disbelief while Muriel continues her tantrum, furious at being excluded from the royal visit. Maintaining her composure, Christina apologizes to Irel and asks for a brief moment alone to speak with her sister. Irel graciously agrees to wait, and Christina sternly orders Muriel to follow her away from the tea table. Leaving the prince behind, Christina leads her sister down the stone path to handle the situation privately. Once out of earshot, Christina coldly informs Muriel that she was not invited to this tea and orders her to return to her room. Muriel accuses Christina of trying to push her away and threatens to tell their father about this mistreatment. Christina crosses her arms and coldly dismisses her sister, calling her nothing more than a simple nuisance. She commands Muriel to stay in her room during the visit and permanently revokes her invitation to tea with the prince. Muriel attempts to play the victim by asking if she is hated, but Christina indifferently replies that she simply refuses to waste her time. When Muriel pushes for clarification, Christina looks her dead in the eye and confirms that spending time with her is indeed a waste. Ignoring Muriel's protests, she orders the maid Lucine to escort the girl back to her room immediately. Composing herself, Christina returns to the table and sincerely apologizes to the prince for the unsightly disturbance. She steps closer to him, signaling that she has a matter of grave importance to discuss privately. Irel graciously grants her request, though he notes how rare it is for her to leave her sister alone. Before she can speak, Irel interrupts with a serious expression and asks if he might pose a question first. He stares intently at her and drops a bombshell question, demanding to know who she really is. Christina is stunned as he admits he has been harboring doubts about her identity since the moment she walked in. He observes that while she used to be shy and reserved, she now carries herself with a confidence that feels completely foreign. Irel points out that she previously struggled to call him by his name, always shying away from the intimacy. Yet today she spoke his name naturally, a discrepancy so strange he feels it cannot be explained by a simple change in mood. He insists on knowing the truth, stating that the woman standing before him is not the Christina he once knew. Realizing she cannot hide it, Christina asks if he is willing to listen to a story that will sound impossible to believe. Taking a deep breath, she prepares to reveal the secret that defies all logic. She explains the future timeline, and to her surprise, Irel believes her instantly because he knows she is incapable of lying. While Irel processes the shock of a tragedy 3 years hence, Christina offers him a fresh, warm drink to calm his nerves. Irel suddenly asks if she knows of Lady Sheila, the sister of the former queen. He reveals that Sheila is also rumored to be a time traveler who founded Perla Abbey and prevented 2 wars. Christina is startled by the connection, recalling that she actually visited Perla Abbey just before the fire occurred. She adds that her grandfather once mentioned a blood relation between her mother's side and Sheila's Aquilan family. Connecting the dots, Irel decides he must investigate both Lady Sheila and the Abbey to uncover the source of this phenomenon. Christina asks if he truly believes her story, and he affirms it without a second thought. He smiles, noting that her care in keeping his tea hot proves she is still the Christina who knows him best. Iroh vows to help prevent the coming danger, reassuring her that her identity is defined by her heart, not her timeline. Overwhelmed by his unwavering trust, Christina wipes away a tear of relief. She asks about his inspection tour, and he explains he is bound for the Dunfort border by direct order of the king. He tries to comfort her, explaining that his brother Seamus will take his place as her escort for the birthday party since he must depart. Christina tries to correct him about her earlier perfect lady comment, but he laughs and says she never stopped being one. Sensing her hesitation, Iroh urges her to drop the formalities and voice her true feelings right now. He assures her that her desires could never be a burden, though she internally fears being selfish. Finally opening her heart, she admits she wanted him to be the one escorting her so he could see the dress matching his gift. Iroh blushes deeply, confessing that he too would have loved nothing more than to see her in that dress. Christina vows that when she returns, the first person she meets will be him, penning a message to seal the promise. Preparing for the big event, she asks the maid about the preparations for tomorrow's party. The maid reports that Muriel hasn't left her room, prompting Christina to steel herself for the coming conflict. Christina recalls the previous timeline's manipulation where Muriel cried about her illegitimate status to get her way. She wonders if her firm command to wear pink will actually change the outcome of the party this time around. The morning of the birthday party arrives, bringing with it a heavy atmosphere of anticipation. Staring into the mirror, Christina asks if anything looks amiss, but her maid assures her she is beautiful. The maid notes that Muriel hasn't appeared yet, wondering if the younger sister will actually attend. A knock sounds at the door, and the maid predicts Muriel has arrived wearing the stunning pink dress. To their surprise, it is her brother who enters, thanking the staff and asking if Christina is ready. They descend the grand staircase together, the sounds of the gathering crowd rising to meet them. The host introduces Christina to the assembly, welcoming the guests to his daughter's celebration. Christina smiles graciously, thanking everyone for gathering to celebrate her special day. The guests are captivated by her presence, whispering in awe about her breathtaking beauty. Confusion ripples through the crowd as people glance toward the entrance, mistaking a new arrival for the guest of honor. Muriel rushes in late, breathless, and calling out an apology to her sister. The room falls silent as Muriel curtsies, wearing a purple dress that deliberately mimics Christina's own. Her brother asks if this is a sick joke, but Christina calmly intervenes and asks to handle the situation herself. She laughs internally, realizing that living through this nightmare a second time has given her an unnatural calm. Noting her father's sudden disappearance, she decides it is actually fortuitous that he isn't here to interfere. Christina observes everything with sharp clarity, hearing and seeing things she missed in her past life. Guests begin to whisper about the impropriety of the adopted sister wearing the same color as the star. Her gaze shifts to the crowd, identifying the noble women who were once candidates to marry Prince Iroh. The whispers turn malicious, criticizing Muriel's low birth and lack of etiquette as a stain on the family's status. Oblivious or uncaring, Muriel smiles brightly and congratulates her sister on a wonderful party. Christina cuts through the pleasantries, demanding to know why Muriel ignored the order to wear pink. Muriel claims she secretly copied the dress out of admiration, but Christina coldly orders her to change immediately. When Muriel whines that she worked hard to look like her, Christina retorts that the confusion is exactly the problem. As her brother watches in silence, Christina realizes she is the only one equipped to handle the monster Muriel used to be. Christina internally mocks Muriel's facade of sweetness, recognizing the greed that drives her to steal everything her sister owns. Christina confronts Muriel with a harsh tone, demanding she finally act like a refined lady befitting her station. Softening her gaze, Christina reveals she wore the same color dress on purpose to quell Muriel's anxiety. She gently admonishes Muriel for only finding confidence when mirroring her, insisting she is lovely enough to stand alone. Muriel blinks in confusion, unable to process the unexpected kindness from her sister. The silence shatters as the brother applauds, praising Christina's wonderful display of sisterly affection. Christina humbly accepts the praise while apologizing to Countess Galahar for the earlier disturbance. Turning to Muriel, Christina dismisses her to change clothes, ignoring her stammered apology with a reassuring command. Christina smooths over the situation with the astute Countess Galahar, who observes the scene with a knowing gaze. The brother steps in to rescue Christina, gallantly requesting the first dance for her 15th birthday. As they dance, Christina analyzes the Countess, recalling that in the previous life, the woman had favored Muriel. Seizing the moment, Christina probes her brother for his true opinion on their father and Muriel. She realizes the wall she once felt between them has vanished, replaced by a new, tangible connection. The song ends, but Christina's worry spikes as she notices Muriel has not yet returned. Panic sets in as she scans the room, realizing her sister has completely disappeared from the hall. Christina discovers Muriel cornered by noble bullies who sneer at her commoner blood and arrogant attitude. The tormentors mock Muriel's polite facade, accusing her of being part of Christina's manipulative schemes. One bully shouts that they are merely defending Lady Christina, claiming the confrontation is none of Muriel's business. Christina freezes as she overhears them claim Muriel is only tolerated because her mother died, a cruel, twisted logic she never intended. She realizes with horror that her own change in behavior has inadvertently empowered these sycophants to abuse Muriel in her name. The bullies ruthlessly drive the point home, demanding Muriel understand she will never be fit for the ducal family. Christina explodes onto the scene, her voice dripping with venom as she demands to know what they are doing. Ignoring their stammered excuses about teaching manners, Christina's body moves on instinct to protect her sister. She fiercely reminds them that Muriel is an official member of the ducal house and their interference is unwelcome. Glaring at the group, she clarifies that their misguided loyalty is a gross misunderstanding of her desires. Christina screams that abandoning Muriel is impossible, shattering the bullies' assumptions with her ferocious declaration. Far away in the kingdom of Kahal, a messenger urgently alerts His Highness to a sudden development. A man calls out to a noblewoman, asking if she is indeed Lady Christina. Christina confirms her identity with a haughty demeanor, internally resolving to appear as arrogant as possible to maintain her facade. She recognizes the three approaching girls as Hermina, Erica, and Diana, recalling their specific family lineages. Suspecting they are using her name to get close to the Duke's family, Christina realizes she has no memory of being close to them. The trio attempts to justify their confrontation by claiming that Muriel behaved inappropriately. Christina coldly retorts that 3 people attacking one person is the only thing that seems inappropriate to her. She offers to overlook their transgression this one time, provided they apologize to Muriel immediately. As they hesitate, she issues a sharp warning that she will not sit idly by if something like this happens again. Intimidated by her command, the 3 girls hurriedly offer their sincere apologies to Muriel and announce their departure. The group scurries away into the distance, leaving the 2 sisters alone in the quiet garden. Christina reaches out to check on her sister, but Muriel violently slaps her hand away and screams at her not to touch her. Muriel furiously rejects Christina's help, calling her act a fake performance and demanding she stay out of matters that don't concern her. Trembling with rage, Muriel looks her sister in the eye and screams that she hates her. Christina coolly counters that she also hates the fact that Muriel cannot even say thank you in such a situation. Muriel is left completely stunned and speechless by Christina's unexpected and blunt comeback. Christina turns to walk away, remarking over her shoulder that she wasn't looking for gratitude but simply speaking her mind. As her 15th birthday party concludes, Christina resolves to follow her own beliefs regardless of Muriel's feelings. The next morning, Christina walks down the hallway and offers a hesitant greeting to the empty air. Muriel appears behind her and greets her sister with a cheerful, perfectly composed smile. They enter the dining room where their brother wonders why the 2 late sleepers are up, and Muriel greets him brightly. Their father asks Seamus when he will return to the academy, to which Seamus replies that it will be very soon. The father addresses Christina, noting that the previous night's party was a success thanks to his efforts. His expression abruptly darkens as he accuses Christina of using her friends to bully Muriel. He claims a servant saw Muriel surrounded and that Muriel confirmed Christina was present while crying in fear. As Muriel acts the victim, the father scolds Christina for failing in her duty to protect her younger sister. He reveals that Muriel told him Christina said she hates her, a claim that leaves Christina visibly shocked. Christina admits she said the words but tries to explain the context, only to be cut off by her father refusing excuses. He demands she apologize to Muriel and insults her, saying if she lacks charm she should at least have a good personality like Elvanina. When Christina tries to speak, he interrupts again to say her silence is just like Elvanina's. Suddenly, Seamus intervenes with a serious expression, declaring that Christina did not bother Muriel at all. Seamus intervenes to correct the story, revealing that he was present yesterday and witnessed Christina dignifiedly scolding the girls who were bullying Muriel for being a commoner. The Duke laughs off his son's serious defense, condescendingly telling him not to get so upset over the matter. He turns to Muriel and asks for confirmation that she didn't mean any harm, to which she stammers a timid agreement. Dismissing Seamus's account, the father declares it impossible for a noble lady like Christina to be cruel without reason and decides to punish the servant Barlick instead. When Seamus protests, his father glares at him with intensity, asking if he realizes he is speaking to the Duke and calling him arrogant. Seamus stands his ground, acknowledging he is merely Seamus, the son, speaking to his father, the Duke of O'Flaherty. He presses on, questioning why his father has always been exceptionally strict with Christina compared to everyone else. The Duke denies being harsh on Christina, explaining that the difference in treatment exists simply because Muriel is special. Christina overhears this conversation from the hallway, stopping in her tracks to wonder what he means by that Muriel. Her father's voice carries out of the room as he reveals that Muriel was born under a specific and special fate. Elsewhere, Prince Iriel and his aide Brian inspect a field of graves where names and dates have been freshly engraved. They are alarmed to discover that more than 10 people have died within a single month without any report reaching the capital. Noting the graves belong to residents of Privied Village, Brian wonders if an epidemic is responsible for the sudden mass casualties. The prince rejects the epidemic theory, pointing out that the causes of death vary wildly from falling off horses to food poisoning. A messenger informs Prince Iriel that the village elder wishes to speak with him, though Brian finds the timing highly suspicious. An elderly woman named Ludmila welcomes them, apologizing that her failing legs prevent her from greeting them properly in such a humble place. Iriel apologizes for the intrusion, but Brian interrupts to demand proof of the prince's identity before they proceed. The prince produces the royal seal, presenting it to the elder as sufficient proof of his lineage. Ludmila requests a private audience, causing Brian to protest until he offers to be searched for weapons to ensure the prince's safety. Despite Brian's reluctance, Prince Iriel agrees to the elder's terms and orders his escorts to wait outside. Alone with the elder, the prince asks why she insisted on speaking only to him regarding the situation. Ludmila explains that the phenomenon of frequent accidental deaths is a rare event that can only be revealed to a member of the royal family. She asks the prince if he knows why the neighboring kingdom of Dunfort has refrained from attacking, hinting that the mountains offer more than just physical protection. She reveals that the ancestors of Dunfort are also buried in these mountains, leading both nations to revere the land as sacred. Ludmila warns that human mistakes and neglected rituals create cracks in their spiritual defense, allowing evil to slip in like water through a mud wall. The prince realizes that this encroaching evil is the true cause behind the string of bizarre accidents plaguing the village. The elder confirms that this evil opposes good and seeks to destroy the sacred, necessitating a specific countermeasure. She declares they must search for the Sacred One, as only that individual possesses the power to confront the spreading darkness. Ludmila describes the Sacred One as a girl born clutching a stone of protection in her hand. She reveals that this savior has already been born into the world and is currently awaiting the right moment to save them. Back at the dinner, the father finishes his explanation by stating he cannot say more, leaving Christina shocked that Muriel is the child of fate. He admits that he initially placed his hopes in Christina, believing she was the chosen one, but ultimately she was not. With a relieved smile, he declares that Muriel is the one who answered the call and lived up to the destiny. He abruptly ends the conversation, promising to explain everything in 3 years, and leaves the room despite Christina's attempt to stop him. Left behind, Christina comes to the devastating realization that her father never actually saw her efforts. Tears stream down her face as she understands that everything she sacrificed for her father and family was ignored. Overwhelmed by despair, she questions if her entire life has been meaningless. Christina Liana O'Flaherty as a flawless role model for ladies who carried out her duties with grace and high elegance. In a flashback, her father sternly instructs her that a noble daughter exists to help the household and support her father. Young Christina cheerfully accepts this heavy burden, promising her teacher that she will do her absolute best. The memory shifts to her father coldly ordering her to give her ribbon to Muriel, prioritizing the younger sister. Christina obediently agrees, taking on the management of the neglected estate after Muriel's maid resigns. Despite the unfair treatment, she always endured silently and held back her desire to complain or respond. The memory concludes with her father's crushing declaration that he does not expect anything from her whatsoever. Back in the present, maids Lucine and Mary rush into the room, panicked by Christina's appearance and asking if she is okay. Christina feels self-conscious about her swollen eyes and decides she cannot bear to go out today. Mary confidently tells her to leave the matter to her and immediately prepares to fix the problem. Using a damp towel and medicinal herbs, Mary performs a first-rate massage that makes the puffiness disappear instantly. Mary reveals she has always been watching Christina and knows she studied until midnight, which caused the swelling. Christina tries to thank her, but Mary insists it is the least she can do for a mistress who works so hard. Lucine adds her own advice, warning that while diligence is a strength, overworking will eventually harm Christina's body. Touched by their care, Christina admits that her father's words shocked her so much that she cried until her eyes swelled. She realizes that these women truly see her for who she is and thanks them from the bottom of her heart. Strengthening her resolve, Christina decides that since her father expects nothing from her, she will expect nothing from him in return. She determines that she must protect these loyal people and has no time to waste on sadness. Sitting at her desk, she compares the events of her previous life to the current timeline to identify changes. She notes that today marks the third day since she turned 15, leaving about 3 years before the tragedy with Muriel occurs. Since returning, one burning question has refused to leave her mind as she writes down her thoughts. She wonders who was truly pulling the strings from behind the curtain during the destruction of her past life. The culprit planted a fake love letter to frame her, set the fire, killed the servants, and drugged her family with sleeping pills. Christina recalls that she didn't drink the water that night, realizing the plan wasn't perfect and that Muriel couldn't have acted alone. She reasons that if Muriel was truly this special child, she would have inherited everything even if Christina remained silent. Questioning the necessity of the massacre, she wonders why the culprit felt the need to kill everyone in the estate instead of just her. She concludes that Muriel's connections were not wide enough to monitor everything and orchestrate such a complex crime. Her thoughts drift to a broken glass and the memory of her mother, wondering how things might have been if that glass had never shattered. A sudden realization strikes her, and she stands up abruptly with a look of fierce determination. The door opens and Seamus enters, asking his sister if she wants to talk. Seamus stands at Christina's door and awkwardly asks if it is too strange for him to invite her to tea in his room out of the blue. Christina agrees to the invitation, prompting Seamus to hesitantly begin speaking before reassuring her that everything is fine. She smiles warmly and thanks him, admitting that she would not have been able to say what he told their father yesterday. Seamus turns away with a guilty expression, muttering that he might have made things harder on her by talking too much. When he claims he is not kind at all, Christina gently refutes him and insists that he is truly a kind brother. Surprised by her praise, Seamus reveals he had not planned to return to the estate until others persuaded him. He explains that he received letters from Lucine and Thomas at the academy asking him to be her escort for the party. He adds that when he told Prince Iriel, the prince insisted he return immediately because they heard she had a fever. Christina chuckles softly and expresses her sincere gratitude for everyone's concern, causing Seamus to look at her curiously. Seamus remarks that the servants must have really thought he would never return home, and Christina confirms it is true. She teases him about the academy being comfortable, prompting a sarcastic smile and a laugh from Seamus. He smiles and admits that being with her like this makes him feel like they are children again. The tea is served in delicate china cups, marking a peaceful interlude before the serious conversation begins. Christina breaks the silence with a resolute expression, declaring that she wants to leave the house. Seamus looks concerned and asks if this sudden decision is related to the incident that happened yesterday. She explains that her departure would prevent Muriel from coveting her position and potentially stop the fire from ever happening. Christina insists she would rather work as a maid in a noble household than stay and suffer the unbearable comparison to Muriel. She smiles and asks Seamus to help her find a place to work, claiming she will learn a lot from the experience. Seamus looks skeptical, but Christina presses him by asking if he knows more about these matters or if he opposes her plan. He denies being against it but sighs, admitting that their father's harshness was partly due to his own failures. Seamus explains that as one of the 4 great ducal families, the O'Flaherty name presents a massive obstacle to her plan. He points out that no noble would dare hire the daughter of a prestigious house and the fiancée of the second prince as a maid. He suggests asking grandfather Osierin, but then remembers her upcoming marriage to Iriel complicates things. Christina panics internally, realizing she cannot wait for the wedding because the tragic fire happened right before it in the past. She admits she wants to tell their father everything but knows she sounds selfish, while Seamus listens intently. She resigns herself to the fact that to their father, she and Muriel are just equal sisters, making the truth hard to accept. Seamus recalls the freedom he felt at the academy and agrees that it might be better for her to live elsewhere. Christina suggests finding a place in the provinces, but Seamus rejects the idea of her being too far from the capital. A thought strikes Seamus as he murmurs Prince Iriel's name, formulating a new plan in his mind. He shifts the topic to her bridal training, asking how her lessons to become the prince's wife are progressing. Christina happily reports that she has nearly completed everything and that her tutors were very kind to her. Seamus asks specifically about her relationship with the queen and the crown princess. She replies that they are both very kind and often invite her for tea, confirming her good standing. Seamus decides that since their father is weak to power, he will bypass Iriel and ask the crown prince directly. He reveals an image of the royal palace to Christina and announces that she will live there. Seamus declares that she will stay at the palace as the crown princess's personal attendant. Christina is left completely stunned and speechless by his unexpected solution. Her father recoils in disbelief, shouting at her nonsense and demanding to know if she truly intends to work in the palace. Christina meets his gaze with unwavering eyes, offering nothing but a silent, defiant stare. She realizes he is reacting exactly as she expected, believing that his authority alone should be reason enough to stop her. With a polite "excuse me," she declares she will join the palace in a week and leaves him stunned in her wake. Ignoring her brother's call to wait, she walks down the hall while trembling from the adrenaline of the confrontation. A smile breaks through her nerves as she realizes it wasn't that difficult to oppose her father without any support for the first time. It feels as if a heavy spell has been lifted from her shoulders as she departs in the carriage a few days later. Before leaving, she thanks Seamus for his arrangements, and he urges her to be careful on her way. Seamus explains that the crown princess insisted on her service, which convinced their father to agree the night before. He cheerfully advises her to do her best as a good conversation companion for Her Highness. Laughing, he points out that their father is weak against power and this is a perfect example of his changing stances. Seamus gets into the carriage, revealing he will also be visiting the palace soon to look into a few matters. Muriel suddenly rushes out breathless, presenting Seamus with an embroidery she worked on all night. Tears in her eyes, she begs him to visit again while he praises the beauty of her work. As Seamus's carriage departs, Christina orders everyone to return to their places, but Muriel calls out to her. Muriel exclaims that it is terrible Christina is leaving to serve the crown princess as a conversation companion. She complains that it is unfair for Christina to live in luxury at the palace while she is left behind. Christina sharply retorts that she won't be living in luxury and warns Muriel that her tone insults Her Highness. Muriel accuses Christina of always looking down on her with disdain and mocking her for being a commoner. Christina grabs her shoulders and firmly denies mocking her, telling her to listen carefully. Muriel continues to wail that Christina never comforts her and is always harsh, leaving Christina stunned. A strange shift occurs as Muriel suddenly stops crying and asks if Christina is feeling lonely. Muriel bursts into manic laughter, dismissing the moment and asking what Christina is talking about. She abruptly switches to a cold demeanor, stating she hasn't forgiven Christina and needs no permission because she is a special girl. Christina watches her walk away, realizing that saying anything aloud would only please Muriel since she already gets special treatment. Left alone in the hallway, Christina questions if her own coldness makes her truly harsh as Muriel claimed. At the palace, Christina formally introduces herself to Crown Prince Renat and Crown Princess Freya with a curtsy. Prince Renat greets her warmly, insisting there is no need for such formality since they are not strangers. Freya beams with joy and immediately suggests that they all go out together tomorrow. Christina is taken aback when Freya proposes wearing their finest clothes to watch a play. When Renat mentions security issues, Freya pivots to asking if she can gift Christina a dress instead. Renat calls the behavior inappropriate, but Freya argues that Christina's current dresses are way too plain. Freya finds it odd that the stylish Duke dresses his daughter in such conservative designs, though Renat insists she is still beautiful. Winking playfully, Freya declares that a girl of her age should enjoy elegance, and Christina realizes the princess is very perceptive. Christina accepts the offer with a bright smile, saying she would really love that, which delights Freya. Meanwhile, Seamus walks through the palace corridors and is stopped by a guard asking if he needs something. He casually replies that he has a small matter to attend to in the palace archives. Seamus enters the silent library, confirming that no one else is present before beginning his search. He pulls a book on the kingdom's founding, reading about the O'Flaherty family's major role as one of the 4 great houses. Removing his glasses in frustration, he wonders if that scant information is really all that exists despite searching all sources. Seamus stares blankly at the book, frustrated that there isn't a single word recorded about a special child. Meanwhile, Muriel barges into her father's office and demands he take her to the palace, whining that it is unfair Christina gets everything. As she throws a tantrum and smashes objects, her father snaps and screams at her to be quiet, disgusted by her lack of manners. His mind drifts back 20 years, noting with disdain that Muriel is just like her mother in every way. He recalls his political marriage to Elvanina Yut Osieran, a union formed solely for the sake of an alliance. Finding no comfort in his wife, he remembers initiating an affair with her commoner maid, Eva. Memories of his work resurface, specifically the day he received a troubling report that the river fish population was declining. The O'Flaherty family held the widest lands among the 4 great houses, including a crucial river stream used for large-scale fish farming. They bore the sole responsibility for providing river fish for the kingdom's annual winter festival celebrating the god's birth. He smirked at Elvanina's ignorance of his affair and dismissed the daughter she bore as not being special, unlike Eva's child. When Eva gave birth, he was ecstatic to see the newborn clutching a small stone in her hand, proving his belief. Eva looked up from her bed seeking praise, asking if she had finally done what the noble Lady Elvanina could never do. She pressed him on his promise to make her his official wife, to which he gave a vague assurance that it would happen in due time. Holding the stone, he became convinced that this special child was the key to securing his own power and future. After both Elvanina and Eva passed away, he eventually introduced himself to the young, ragged Muriel as her father. He took the girl in, telling her that they would live together from that moment on. A dark, possessive smile formed on his face as he internalized that the special child belonged solely to him. In the present, Prince Iriel kneels before the king to report on his inspection tour, humbly deflecting praise for doing his duty. The king clears the room of attendants and asks Iriel to report exactly what he saw during his travels. He specifically inquires if the elder Ludmila truly spoke the words regarding the devil and the saint. Iriel admits that after leaving the village, he began to dismiss the story of a child born with a stone as mere fantasy. The king reveals that the story is actually true, assuring Iriel that his confusion is a natural reaction. He explains that this ancient knowledge is a closely guarded secret known only to a very small number of people. The secrecy is necessary because publicly revealing the tale of the devil would cause mass panic and unrest among the people. The king reminds Iriel of the legend of Lady Sheila, the saint who founded Perla Monastery and saved the kingdom from the devil. Iriel is startled by the name, repeating Lady Sheila, with a look of sudden realization. He internally questions why Christina, who also turned back time, never mentioned anything about a stone of protection. The king declares they must consider the possibility that the devil has returned and orders a reinvestigation of the village deaths. He emphasizes that if their fears are founded, the situation facing the kingdom is truly dangerous. The king commands Iriel to verify the true identity of the saint with absolute secrecy to avoid identity fraud. Iriel vows to keep the secret, while the king warns that the neighboring kingdom of Dunfort also seeks the saint. Looking out toward the mountains, the king grimly predicts that Dunfort may attempt to steal her from them. Merritt the tailor arrives from Mr. Muller's shop, expressing his great pleasure at the honor of serving them on this occasion. The maids guide Christina to the fitting area and eagerly ask her to try on the new dress immediately. Merritt beams with pride as he explains that he was deeply engrossed in sewing this special order for a dear customer. Christina watches Freya's delighted expression and admits she feels truly happy right now. Merritt describes the gown as the latest fashion from the Koj Empire, featuring an open neckline perfect for soirees. Christina worries the neckline is too wide, but Freya insists it beautifully highlights her elegance and slender figure. Merritt explains that the wide pleats and lack of a waist cinch create a slimming effect, which Christina hesitantly accepts. Freya happily reveals she suggested this design specifically to free Christina from the pain of wearing corsets. She confidently predicts the comfortable style will become popular here too, especially since she is wearing it. Gazing at the reflection, Freya declares that anyone who sees this stunning dress will surely want to wear one just like it. Christina looks puzzled by the generosity and asks Freya what is the matter. She openly asks why Freya is treating her with such kindness despite her lack of noteworthy service. Christina lowers her gaze, feeling unworthy of such attention since she is still new to her role. Freya suggests the reason might be that Christina finally expressed a genuine desire to do something for herself. She points out that begging for this job was the first time Christina ever did something for her own sake. Freya acknowledges that Christina has always put her best efforts sincerely into her duties at court and home. However, she noticed Christina was always reserved about her own needs and never gave herself enough attention. Freya smiles warmly, urging Christina to accept the dress and enjoy this moment of directing sincerity toward herself. She asks if Christina ever noticed how she was seen, to which Christina tearfully admits she never did. Freya simply smiles with a radiant expression, letting her warmth wash over Christina. Christina holds a glass and realizes it never occurred to her to do something solely for herself before today. She reflects that her only focus had been keeping Muriel away to prevent the coming disaster. Wondering if following her heart makes her different from her past self, she questions if she has truly changed. Prince Iriel arrives and stammers, overwhelmed with emotion upon seeing Christina in the palace. He admits that although it has only been a month, seeing her here makes him truly realize she has returned. Iriel compliments the dress, saying it suits her very well and that she looks beautiful. Christina thanks him but worries that a dress tailored specifically for her might be a bit too extravagant. Iriel blushes and confesses she is so lovely that he feels embarrassed to look at her directly. He attributes his shyness to their time apart, but the intensity of his gaze makes Christina blush as well. Their eyes meet in a silent moment of shared embarrassment and affection. Christina teases him, reminding him of what she said before and asking if he is really embarrassed now. Iriel shifts the topic to serious matters, mentioning that Muriel has expressed interest in being with Lady Freya. He explains that Duke O'Flaherty has spoken to them, but they want to hear Christina's opinion before declining. Christina realizes her father is pushing this because Muriel is not ready and lacks the etiquette to be near the crown princess. Reading her father's demanding letters, she wonders if they have lost their minds to try and replace her with Muriel at court. Iriel apologizes for his father's unreasonable demands, remarking that from the Duke's perspective, Muriel appears perfect in behavior. He falls silent for a moment, his expression shifting as he prepares to change the subject. Without warning, he reaches out and gently touches Christina's hair, causing her to freeze in surprise. Christina asks if he was about to say something, but he smiles and reveals he was just picking a tiny fluff off her shoulder. He assures her that she can tell him anything without hesitation, though she decides to keep some thoughts for later. Lowering his voice under the umbrella, Iriel asks if she has told anyone else, like the Duke or Seamus, about coming from the future. He looks at her with concern, asking if something is worrying her as they walk through the garden. Christina firmly denies telling anyone else, confirming that Iriel is the only one who knows her secret. They are suddenly interrupted by Countess Galahar and a male companion, who greet them amidst the rain. Iriel notices they are sharing an umbrella and asks if he should be thanking them, pointing out the intimacy. The Countess introduces her companion as Aranan de Driscoll, a count from the Coge Empire who is on his way to greet the Queen. Christina feels an inexplicable strangeness from the man as he politely kisses her hand. Aranan mentions hearing about her wonderful relationship with her sister and expresses a desire to meet Muriel someday. When Christina informs him that Muriel is still a child, he replies with a cryptic smile that it is a pity. Trying to shift the conversation, Christina asks about the Coge Empire, noting it is famous as a fashion hub. Aranan begins to describe the imperial capital, mentioning a grand theater that opened a long time ago. He details how the emperor attends opera performances almost daily, highlighting the cultural richness of his home. Christina mentions hearing about a massive cathedral with stunning architecture, expressing her admiration. Aranan abruptly ends the topic, claiming he lacks the information to do the cathedral's beauty justice with mere words. He turns to the Countess, calling her Caitlin, with a warm smile, and tells her it is time for them to go back. Iriel and Christina watch in silence as the couple walks away, leaving a lingering sense of curiosity. Iriel remarks that the usually traditional Countess Galahar seems completely different, attributing it to the power of being in love. He suggests they take a break as well, leading Christina toward a sheltered bench nearby. They sit together on the bench, grateful for the respite from the walking and the rain. He reflects on his past self from the previous life, remembering he was just the second prince and only 17 years old. His thoughts drift to his mother, Lady Maeve, and he recalls how he never understood her isolation during that time. Christina looks at him, sensing his melancholic mood as the rain continues to fall around them. She gently asks him how Lady Maeve has been lately, breaking his internal reverie. Ariel acknowledges that her situation makes it difficult to visit, but says he doesn't intend to meddle in affairs that don't concern him. However, he softly advises that it is best to see the ones you love while you still have the chance. Flustered, he admits he is not good at expressing his feelings and stammers as he tries to find the right words. He takes her hand and confesses that she has always been someone very dear to him. The atmosphere grows heavy with emotion as the rain falls, and Christina whispers his name. Leaning in, Ariel finally bridges the distance and confesses, "I love you." He embraces her tightly, and Christina smiles, accepting his feelings with a warm tn. Christina reflects that although she loved him in the past, she feels even closer to him now despite his clumsiness. They sit in comfortable silence, leaning against each other on the bench, savoring the moment. Christina looks at him with deep affection, her cheeks flushed with happiness. The moment is shattered when Brian arrives, calling out, "Your Highness," and apologizing for the interruption. Brian sarcastically remarks that since he interrupted a heartfelt moment, he must have good news, but then reveals it is quite the opposite. With a grim expression, Brian declares that the timing is terrible, signaling the start of a new crisis. Ariel reads the grim report detailing mysterious deaths occurring in territories far beyond the village of Privede. He is visibly shaken to learn that several cases classified as accidental have been reported in villages near the borders. The map reveals a disturbing pattern, with deaths spreading from the eastern borders of Privede and Fariga to the western lands of Akairo and Crow. Brian confirms that the villagers are living in fear and unease, suspecting something far more sinister than mere accidents. Ariel grimly recalls that wars in the past began for this very reason, as spreading evil corrupts human hearts and erodes respect. He decides to submit a recommendation to the king to increase rituals and ceremonies, hoping to ease the people's growing fears. Brian notes the irony of this decision, knowing that Prince Ariel usually detests empty rituals that lack true faith. Ariel explains that evil creeps in through the gaps in faith, wondering if the outcome they are witnessing is because the evil has already emerged. He stares down the empty hallway, refusing to believe that it is already too late to stop the encroaching darkness. Elsewhere, Freya asks Christina about her impression of Count Driscoll after meeting him in the garden with Ariel. Christina hesitates, sensing something strange about the man, but notes that he seemed very close to Countess Galahar. Freya reveals that the Countess requested permission to invite Count Driscoll to the upcoming tea party, which Christina finds unusual. Christina agrees that the request is out of character for the Countess but politely says she does not mind the addition. Freya excitedly suggests hosting the party in the garden to accommodate more guests and proposes inviting other gentlemen as well. A sudden, loud gasp of shock interrupts the conversation as Christina reacts to the suggestion. Christina panics and apologizes profusely, mistakenly thinking she overstepped her bounds by offering an opinion. Freya clarifies she simply meant to ask if Christina would join them, knowing she usually dislikes social gatherings. Freya smiles warmly, insisting she wants to return the favor for all of Christina's help and help her debut properly. Christina touches her neck and smiles, realizing that it is not necessary for her to remain the same isolated person she was before. Later, Freya exclaims in delight as Christina steps out in the beautiful dress tailored from the imperial design. Christina presents the dress to the gathered ladies, explaining she chose a unique design currently trending in the empire. The ladies admire the gown enthusiastically, predicting that the unique style is sure to become the new fashion standard. A voice calls out from behind, and Christina turns to see Lady Lisa approaching them with a sharp gaze. Lisa greets her familiarly, claiming they met at the debutante ball, though Christina is embarrassed to admit she has forgotten. Christina feels a wave of nervousness, noting that Lisa, a daughter of the O'Connell family, resembles Muriel in a way that makes her uneasy. Lisa politely asks if she and her companions may join the group, interrupting the private moment. Christina flashes a polite smile but immediately excuses herself, deciding to withdraw from the interaction. She walks away briskly, leaving a stunned Lisa and the others behind her. Finding a quiet table, Christina sits alone until another noblewoman approaches to speak with her. The lady expresses her joy at finally meeting Christina, admitting she heard Christina usually avoided such events. The ladies enjoy the pleasant atmosphere of the tea party, with Christina agreeing that she feels the same warmth and happiness. From the shadows, Lady Lisa watches the cheerful group with a gaze full of resentment and suppressed anger. As the party concludes, a maid informs Christina that her carriage is ready at the entrance. Lady Lisa suddenly intercepts Christina, asking if she may have a word with her before she leaves. Lisa accuses Christina of avoiding her, but Christina smoothly denies it with a polite smile, claiming the time apart just felt long. Lisa drops her facade and bluntly asks if the rumors circulating about Christina are actually true. She confronts Christina with the story that she has been kicked out of the Duke's house and taken refuge with Princess Freya, which Christina calmly confirms. Lisa is infuriated by Christina's indifference to having no place, but Christina retorts that the definition of having a place varies for everyone. Christina coolly asks if there are more rumors, prompting Lisa to mention the story of the younger sister taking over the Duke's house. Christina turns the tables by asking exactly who told Lisa these stories, causing Lisa to flinch in hesitation. When Christina guesses names like Diana and Erica, Lisa snaps back defensively, shouting that the source doesn't matter. Christina identifies them as the trio who bullied Muriel previously, confirming her suspicions about the source of the gossip. She expresses her disappointment that someone of Lisa's standing would believe such silly rumors from unreliable sources. Christina admits her sister lacks maturity but firmly states that Muriel alone could not destroy anything of significance. Her expression hardens as she declares that while she ignores insults to herself, she will not tolerate anyone tarnishing Princess Freya's name. Lisa explodes in frustration, screaming that Christina is the one at fault for everything. Tears welling in her eyes, Lisa reminds Christina of the promise she made at the debutante ball to visit her home. Lisa reveals she sent an invitation to her birthday party to apologize for missing Christina's, but never received a response. She demands to know if Christina ignored it on purpose, but Christina frantically denies the accusation as a misunderstanding. Christina looks genuinely confused and states clearly that she never received any such invitation. She reasons that the letter must have gotten lost during her chaotic move to the palace and promises to investigate immediately. Lisa looks down in shame, realizing her harsh words were born from the hurt of thinking she was being ignored. Lisa apologizes for her behavior, and Christina forgives her, admitting that the situation was indeed confusing. Lisa laments that she acted in a way unbefitting a duke's daughter, her anger draining away. Christina admits she also overreacted, but Lisa suddenly stops her from leaving with a desperate call to wait. Lisa proposes a new tea party with the three of them, and Christina happily agrees, promising to send the invitation next time. The mood lightens as Lisa teases Christina about getting engaged soon and moving far away where they can't meet. Christina blushes and asks her to stop, but Lisa notices her reaction and realizes she hit a nerve. Lisa giggles mischievously at Christina's embarrassment, enjoying the friendly banter. Nearby, Count Aranan watches the interaction and asks Countess Caitlin what is happening between the ladies. He remarks that it is a lovely scene, prompting the Countess to ask if he has an interest in young girls. Aranan denies the accusation with a smooth smile, assuring Caitlin that he only has eyes for her. He turns his gaze back to the girls, his expression sharpening into something calculating and cold. A sinister smirk plays on Aranan's lips as he fixates his attention on Christina with a hidden agenda. Muriel shoves her tutor to the floor in a fit of rage, leaving the woman shocked and sprawling on the carpet. Screaming at the top of her lungs to be left alone, Muriel paradoxically insists that she is completely calm while trembling with anger. Thomas the butler escorts Lady Libin out, apologizing for the incident and confirming that this will be her last day at the estate. Lady Libin remarks that despite the tantrums, Muriel possesses an astonishing focus and quick understanding when something interests her. She bids Thomas a weary farewell, leaving the chaotic household behind for good. Silence returns to the hallway as the servants watch the tutor leave, the atmosphere heavy with the aftermath of the outburst. Thomas sighs deeply, wondering just how many tutors Muriel has driven away and fearing no noble lady will accept the job now. He reads a letter from Lucine reporting that Christina is thriving at the royal court, a stark contrast to the gloom of the mansion. Muriel overhears the servants gossiping and snaps, accusing them of comparing her to her sister. The maid cowers in fear, begging for forgiveness as Muriel glares at her with intense hostility. In the hallway, Thomas asks the maid Mary if she is all right after enduring Muriel's latest physical assault. Mary tears up and admits that even as a commoner, she cannot tolerate being used as a target for thrown objects anymore. Thomas grimly decides he must speak to the Lord, noting that Christina was the only one who knew how to handle Muriel effectively. In the Duke's study, Thomas reports the tutor's resignation, but the Duke dismissively waves it off as a routine occurrence. Thomas warns that the situation is becoming dangerous for the family's reputation, but the Duke casually offers him wine instead of a solution. The Duke decrees that no more tutors will be hired and orders that Muriel be barred from entering his room to preserve his peace. Thomas tentatively suggests remarriage as a way to bring a mistress in to manage the crumbling estate. Rejecting the idea of a wife, the Duke decides instead to appoint a proper maid for Muriel, realizing common servants cannot handle her. He instructs Thomas to prepare the carriage for an evening outing and to recall old servants from the family's original house if needed. As Thomas leaves with his orders, the Duke complains that Muriel has become completely unbearable since Christina left. Muriel wanders the halls in her nightgown and anxiously asks Thomas if her father has returned home. Thomas blocks her path, coldly informing her that the Lord is busy with official matters and has ordered no one to enter. Muriel whispers a dejected acknowledgement and turns away, realizing she is being shut out completely. She walks alone through the empty corridor, wondering with a heavy heart why no one ever looks at her. Watching a maid clean a vase, Muriel bitterly questions why everyone only ever has praises for her sister. She clings to the memory of her mother's words, reassuring herself that everything in this house rightfully belongs to her. In a flashback, her mother Eva strokes her hair and tells her she is the daughter of a great noble. Eva promises that her father will come for them someday and they will all live together as a family. Young Muriel innocently asks why Owen doesn't visit them several times a month like he used to. Eva's expression darkens into something twisted as she fixates on the source of her misery. She tells Muriel that it is that woman's fault and vows they will take everything back together someday. Eva rants that the legal wife is the only obstacle keeping the Duke from coming to them. Trembling with malice, she mocks the Duchess for being a wife in name only who let a maid steal her husband. Eva calls the noblewoman a deceiver and pathetic, poisoning her daughter's mind with deep-seated resentment. Young Muriel sits alone in the corner hugging her teddy bear, absorbing the toxicity that would shape her entire life. Muriel lies curled in her bed, staring blankly at the floor as the weight of her isolation presses down on her. In a memory, her father kneels beside her, gently holding her hands and asking if she has been lonely since her mother passed. He softly tells the confused girl that it is time to go home, promising that she will have a brother and sister there. The Duke leads her to the grand doors, assuring her that if she ever wants anything, she only needs to ask. The doors open to reveal Seamus and Christina, and the young Christina introduces herself with a bright, welcoming smile. Muriel stands frozen, overwhelmed by the realization that these people already possess the beautiful family and home she lacks. A surge of bitter jealousy erupts within her, and she screams internally that it is unfair for them to have everything. She clutches her chest, tormented by an emptiness that no amount of receiving can fill, asking why she feels so much pain. Back in the present, Lady Lisa congratulates Christina on her engagement to the Crown Prince of Dyrkalinig. Christina blushes and bashfully admits that while they have only exchanged letters, he seems like a kind and gentle person. Lisa notes that the kingdom of Dyrkalinig has a warm, spring-like climate even in winter, advising Christina on her wardrobe. Christina wonders if Count Driscoll is from the south, noting that the Empire's southern lands share that mild weather. When Christina praises the Count as impressive, Freya and Lisa look at her with shocked expressions, misinterpreting her interest. Christina frantically denies their teasing suspicions, flustered by the implication that she is interested in another man. She clarifies that she felt a strange, dazed sensation when the Count spoke to her, as if her soul had momentarily left her body. Freya's expression turns serious as she admits she felt the same unsettling aura and does not see his charm at all. Shaking off the mood, Freya presents a gift to bless the future of both Christina and Lady Lisa. She reveals a pair of beautiful bracelets made from beads and crystal glass, handcrafted on the O'Flaherty lands. Freya explains that these beads are used in rosaries and possess special properties to ward off evil spirits. Christina stares at the bracelet, but her attention is drawn away when Lisa hesitantly calls her name. Lisa's demeanor shifts to one of concern as she admits there is something important she needs to inform Christina about. She reveals that Muriel is rumored to be feigning illness while the tutors she drove away are spreading negative stories. Christina frowns, mentioning she received a letter where Muriel said she missed her, but Lisa suggests it might be a manipulation. Lisa confirms she hasn't received any such message, leaving Christina to wonder if she is the only one Muriel is reaching out to. Seamus steps in, dismissing the letter as a likely lie and asking Christina if she still cares about Muriel despite escaping that house. Christina deflects by asking about his management of the estate, warning him not to let their father know he is working so hard. Seamus admits he would check on Muriel if he could, but confesses that trouble in the estate and a personal matter are distracting him. He blushes and awkwardly mentions meeting a baron's daughter recently, signaling a shift in his usually serious demeanor. Christina's eyes sparkle with teasing delight as she realizes her brother is smitten, though he hastily tries to postpone the interrogation. Seamus clears his throat to regain composure, telling Christina that she should do whatever she wishes regarding their family. He assures her that there is no need for her to return, validating her freedom to stay away. Christina agrees that staying away would keep her safe forever, acknowledging the truth in his words. However, a vision of the burning mansion haunts her, and she realizes ignoring the problem might allow the fire to happen again. She worries about the safety of everyone in the mansion, including Muriel, and knows she cannot simply look away. With firm resolve, Christina turns to Seamus and declares that she will return home, even if it is just for once. She reflects on the difference between them, noting that her encounter with the girl, herself/Freya, gave her a chance. Christina realizes that unlike her, Muriel has absolutely nothing and no one to help her change. She understands that her ability to turn back time was the trigger she needed, a trigger Muriel lacks. Christina concludes that if she doesn't act to provide that trigger, Muriel will remain trapped in her darkness forever. Seamus slammed his hand on the desk, shouting that the explanation provided didn't solve a single thing or excuse the failure. Janarsh stammered, trying to articulate why the hunting yields and weather had been so disastrous across the fiefdom. Sweating nervously, the estate supervisor finally confessed that they actually had no idea what was causing the crisis. Seamus scolded him for the lack of effort, demanding to know if they would be ready for the birthday celebration in time. A cold glare silenced the room as Seamus narrowed his eyes, asking if the subordinate dared to argue with his authority. Thomas interrupted the tension to announce that Lady Christina would return tomorrow, causing Seamus to gasp in sudden relief. Dismissing Janarsh with an offer of wine, Seamus smirked, realizing that his problems were about to be solved by his sister's return. Thomas ushered the bewildered supervisor out of the room, leaving the young lord to his sudden shift in mood. Seamus smiled to himself, satisfied that Thomas would finally stop complaining now that the problem solver was returning. Meanwhile, Prince Irel walked with Christina, asking if she requested leave specifically to visit her sister who seemed fine last time. Christina admitted she was worried, noting that the lack of letters from Lady Lisa during her training was deeply concerning. She expressed a desire to settle the matter before Lady Freya's musical soiree next week, acknowledging the tight deadline. Irel lamented that they wouldn't meet again until things calmed down, as he was bound for another inspection tour despite the graduation. He stopped to reassure her, promising that no matter the distance or time, he would always remain by her side. Christina gazed back at him tenderly, acknowledging that he had indeed always been her constant support. Taking a breath, Irel hinted that because of their bond, he had a specific proposal he wanted to make to her soon. The conversation faded as the carriage rumbled to a halt, signaling Christina's arrival at the O'Flaherty estate. Stepping out of the carriage, Christina greeted her loyal servants, Thomas and Mary, asking if everyone had fared well in her absence. Thomas adjusted his monocle and confirmed everyone was safe, prompting Christina to immediately request to see Muriel. As they walked, Christina asked Mary if watching over Muriel had been difficult while she was away at the palace. Mary's professional facade cracked as she vehemently shouted that dealing with Muriel had been absolutely exhausting. Flustered, the maid apologized for her outburst but explained that Lady Muriel had become incredibly temperamental since Christina left. Mary noted that while the girl's tantrums had worsened to the point of isolation, Muriel occasionally looked terribly sad. The maid bowed in apology for speaking too freely, but Christina simply absorbed the information with a troubled expression. Christina gently opened the door, calling out softly to check on her sister's condition. Muriel lay perfectly still in bed, but Christina noticed the slight twitch of her eyelids that betrayed her feigned sleep. Sighing, Christina bluntly stated that the pretend sleeping was weak and that even a child wouldn't fall for such a performance. Muriel sat up instantly, annoyed that her act failed, and demanded to know if she was only there because father ordered it. She looked away, admitting that when she pretended to be sick out of loneliness, father had immediately promised to summon Christina home. Christina sat on the edge of the bed, gently chiding that Muriel could have simply sent a letter if she missed her that much. Muriel screamed that her stomach still hurt intensely, insisting that she hadn't missed her sister at all and only wanted sympathy for her pain. Christina watched the tantrum with cold detachment, realizing that unlike the past where she would have exploded in anger, she now felt absolutely nothing. She reminded herself that while Muriel was a lonely child with no one else, she could not afford to waste any pity on her. With a swift motion, Christina ripped the blankets off the bed, exposing her sister and ending the charade. She looked down sternly and ordered Muriel to stop whining and get up, asking how long she intended to keep acting like a spoiled brat. The maid gasped in horror while Muriel stared up in stunned silence, completely unprepared for this reaction. Christina's expression softened instantly as she offered a gift from their brother Seamus, suggesting they have tea if Muriel was feeling well enough. Muriel sat frozen, her mind unable to process the sudden shift from scolding to sisterly affection. The Duke entered the room with a sharp glare, warning Christina not to force her sister to do anything since she was still sick. Later at dinner, the Duke casually praised the main dish, maintaining a facade of normalcy despite the tension. He took a sip of wine and chided Christina, instructing her not to be so harsh on Muriel given her fragile condition. Christina ignored the advice and announced she would return to the palace in 2 days, pointing out that Muriel didn't seem sick at all. The Duke slammed his hand down, insisting that Muriel was only pretending to be strong because Christina was there and that she actually desperately wanted her sister by her side. Christina calmly countered that if her presence was pressuring Muriel to feign health, then it would logically be better for her to leave immediately. The Duke sighed in frustration, annoyed that his emotional manipulation was being dismantled by simple logic. Christina stood her ground, explaining she had to help prepare for Lady Freya's musical soiree next week and could not stay. He scoffed at her dedication, arrogantly claiming that there were family matters only he understood and that she couldn't just leave them to others. The stem of the wine glass in his hand cracked under the pressure of his grip as his temper began to boil over. He demanded she stay to handle Muriel's discipline since the girl had driven away every tutor, admitting the household only functioned with Christina in it. The Duke then tried to assign her the Crown Prince's engagement duties, but Christina cut him off with a flat refusal. She declared firmly that she would not act irresponsibly and intended to return to the palace exactly as planned. A dark shadow fell over the Duke's face as his control snapped and he lunged forward in a rage. He roared at her not to dodge as he threw the contents of his wine glass violently in her direction. Christina stepped aside gracefully and asked if he expected respect while acting like a man who spills wine on others, causing him to scream about being mocked. The wine glass shattered against the wall with a deafening crash, leaving a stain dripping down the wallpaper. The servants trembled in fear, begging the Lord to stop, but Christina stood completely still and unfazed by the outburst. Internally, Christina noted that she had expected this violence and realized she was no longer the obedient child he could manipulate. She stared at him without flinching, accepting that she was no longer her father's tool and no longer afraid of his temper. The Duke sneered at her defiance, muttering that all of them were always the same in their rebellion. He glared at her with cold eyes, asking since when she had become such a bad girl who refused to listen. Dropping all pretense, he issued a command that from this moment on, she was forbidden to take a single step outside the estate. He announced that guards had been stationed at every gate and transport wagon, and that no letters would be sent or received. Christina gasped, her composure finally cracking as the reality of her imprisonment set in. The Duke loomed over the table, finalizing his decree with a terrifying calmness, stating that this was an absolute order. Christina looked out the window at the reinforced patrols, noting that leaving the estate and sending letters were now strictly forbidden. She turned to Lucine to confirm that her father had indeed left for a business trip, taking advantage of the Lord's absence. A resigned smile touched Christina's lips as she accepted that this controlling behavior had been the norm for a long time. Realizing the situation actually favored her plans, she instructed Lucine to immediately gather all the servants in the grand hall. The household staff assembled in the large hall, murmuring quietly amongst themselves as they awaited their lady's commands. Christina apologized for interrupting their work and expressed pride in how well they maintained the house while she was away serving the crown princess. She instructed them to report any trouble to Thomas or Lucine in her absence, promising that she would keep their concerns confidential. Shifting the topic to business, she asked the assembly if anyone had information regarding a missing invitation from the O'Connell family. A young maid trembled visibly under the inquiry, her face draining of color as the pressure of the question landed on her. Christina dismissed the rest of the staff, ending the general meeting so she could address the culprit privately. She approached Muriel, who was trying to conceal something under her foot, and demanded to know the meaning of her suspicious behavior. Christina retrieved the letter Muriel had been stepping on, revealing it to be the missing invitation from Lady Lisa. She confronted her sister directly, asking why Muriel had asked for the letter to be hidden in the first place. Muriel feigned a sudden headache to avoid the question, claiming she knew nothing and that the maid Tanya had told her everything. Tanya stepped forward, shaking with fear, and falsely confessed that she was the one who had decided to hide the invitation. The maid stammered a clumsy lie about a courier falling and forgetting the letter, claiming she had intended to deliver it later. Christina smiled sharply at the poor excuse, noting that the letter had clearly been hidden away for quite some time. She dismantled the lie, deducing that Muriel forced the maid to hold the letter to ensure it wouldn't be found during a room search. Christina scolded them for the potential consequences of hiding important mail, though Muriel dismissed it as merely a trivial tea invitation. Her expression hardening, Christina warned her sister that this moment of foolishness would not be easily forgiven. Muriel scoffed arrogantly, claiming father would take her side as always and simply fire Tanya for the incident. Christina looked down at her sister with cold pity, stating that if Muriel truly believed that, she was the most pitiful person in the house. Ignoring the taunt, Christina presented gifts from their brother, offering history and mathematics books that Muriel viewed with disdain. Christina then produced a second gift, stating softly that this one was a personal present from herself. She opened a box to reveal matching necklaces, explaining she had made one for each sibling in the same color. Christina bid her sister goodbye, hoping Muriel would appreciate the first item ever shared between the three of them. In a fit of rage, Muriel slapped the box from Christina's hands, sending the necklace crashing violently to the floor. The girl turned her back on the gift and her sister, trembling with a mix of anger and humiliation. As they walked away, the maids whispered in admiration, remarking on how incredibly kind Christina was to her difficult sister. Mary praised Christina for not giving up on Muriel like everyone else, though Christina questioned privately if her actions were truly born of kindness. Mary scolded the younger maid for her rudeness, reminding the staff that Muriel was still a daughter of the house and deserved respect. The servants whispered among themselves, admiring how Lucine handled the situation with the grace of a noblewoman despite her station. Christina leaned against the wall, realizing that Prince Irel's words about her potential were finally coming true in unexpected ways. She acknowledged that while she had become harsher and more rebellious, she could no longer pretend to be the perfect, passive noble lady. Staring at her own reflection, she wondered if this newfound strength was actually visible to those watching from the outside. Muriel paced anxiously in her room, unsettled by the fact that father still hadn't returned or sent word of his whereabouts. She glared out at the gloomy weather, clicking her tongue in annoyance as the relentless rain added to her isolation. Seeking a distraction, Muriel wandered into the library and called out to see if anyone else was using the room. Christina emerged from the shelves, asking calmly what her sister was doing wandering the halls alone. Muriel stiffened but replied she was merely choosing a book, grumbling that reading was her only option while confined. She lashed out with sudden bitterness, accusing Christina of having everything she ever wanted while she was left with nothing. Christina corrected her sharply, revealing that father was barely ever home and only yelled when he was present. She dismantled Muriel's fantasy, explaining that their mother and Lady Eva were the ones with fond memories, not her. Christina dropped the final truth, stating that father's frequent absences were simply because he was visiting his many mistresses. Muriel covered her ears and screamed that it was a lie, refusing to accept that her idolized father was an adulterer. Silence filled the room as Christina watched the denial wash over her sister, offering no comfort for the painful revelation. She pressed the attack, asking if Muriel still frantically desired to trade lives now that the ugly truth was exposed. Christina stated firmly that she was done protecting Muriel from reality, leaving the girl to decide whether to believe it or not. She warned that even if Muriel managed to steal everything, she lacked the strength to hold onto it for more than a moment. Christina's voice rose as she scolded Muriel for suffocating herself and pushing away the few people who actually cared. Leaning in close, she commanded her sister to finally open her eyes and see the world as it truly was. Christina walked away, leaving Muriel stunned, wondering internally if this harsh approach was truly the right path. She questioned if breaking Muriel's delusions would stop the reckless behavior, or if she had simply been too cruel. Looking around the grand hallway, Christina finally recognized the estate for what it was: a prison built by her father. As the realization settled, Christina felt the invisible chains snap, knowing she was finally ready to escape this house forever. 6 days into the confinement, the atmosphere remained tense as the guards continued their strict watch over the gates. The security remained tighter than ever, with sentries posted at every exit to ensure no one could leave. Lucine entered with a breakfast tray, asking if her mistress wished to eat in her room as usual. Christina admitted she was happy to avoid her father's face, noting that he only ever viewed people as tools for his own benefit. Setting her cup down, she told Lucine that she wouldn't be reading today because she had a different plan in mind. A steely determination filled her eyes as she decided that the time for waiting was officially over. Christina walked purposefully toward the exit, ignoring the oppressive atmosphere of the mansion. A sudden commotion erupted at the main gate, shattering the silence of the morning. Prince Irel stepped out of his carriage, apologizing to the flustered staff for his sudden and unannounced intrusion. With a charming yet authoritative smile, he requested that someone inform Christina of his arrival immediately. The Duke's servants apologized profusely, regretting that Prince Irel had made such a long journey for absolutely nothing. Irel stared in disbelief as the Duke announced that Christina was currently bedridden and unable to see anyone. The prince countered that she had been perfectly healthy just last week, but the Duke insisted her condition had deteriorated suddenly. Feigning concern, the Duke claimed illness strikes without warning and that he planned to inform the palace of her indefinite absence. Irel immediately offered to send a royal physician, causing the Duke to flinch in visible panic at the suggestion. Sweating, the Duke hastily refused the offer, claiming their generational family doctor was already handling the situation. Irel pressed further, asking to see her for just a brief moment, but the Duke continued to stall with flimsy excuses. The Duke lied that Christina refused to be seen in her frail state, while Irel realized immediately that the man was spinning a desperate falsehood. Irel abruptly stopped pressing the issue, turning away with a polite reassurance that he wouldn't worry if she just needed rest. The Duke smiled darkly, remarking that Christina's recovery depended entirely on her feelings settling down. Irel paused, catching the strange word choice, while the Duke quickly corrected himself to say he meant her willpower. Regaining his composure, the Duke promised she would soon return to being the obedient, kind daughter he could be proud of. Shifting topics, Irel asked if Muriel had recovered, and the Duke confirmed she was almost back to full health. Irel smiled pleasantly, stating he had brought gifts for Muriel and asked the Duke to deliver them personally. Servants wheeled in a large covered object as Irel prepared to present his gift to the household. He revealed a cage containing a singing swallow, explaining that he was gifting one to each sister so the birds could compete in song. Irel thanked the Duke for his hospitality with a bright smile that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. Before leaving, Irel reminded the Duke that despite their political arrangement, he held genuine affection for Christina. The Duke watched the carriage depart from the window, suspicious of how easily the prince had withdrawn from the confrontation. As the carriage disappeared into the distance, the estate settled back into a heavy, oppressive silence. The Duke smirked at the birdcage, believing this gift would only serve to remind Christina that she was a prisoner who must obey. Upstairs, the window of Christina's room slid open, breaking the seal of her confinement. The singing swallow burst from its cage, soaring into the sky and releasing a piercing, melodious cry. A guard patrolling the perimeter looked up, startled by the sudden and distinct sound of the bird's song. The signal worked perfectly, and moments later, Irel caught Christina in his arms as she made her escape. Christina clung to him, thanking him sincerely for ensuring her safety just as they had planned. Their minds flashed back to the royal court, where they had devised this strategy knowing her father would try to trap her after 3 days. The plan was simple: if she didn't return, Irel would visit, and the bird would serve as the signal to launch the escape. Irel explained that the Utatsugomi's song carried far, making it the perfect, unsuspected trigger for their rendezvous. With the song echoing through the air, they prepared to meet at the prearranged location and leave the Duke's control forever. Christina marveled at the hidden passage in the cellar, admitting she had no idea such a tunnel existed beneath the estate despite living there her entire life. Irel urged her to hurry, reminding her that they needed to clear the grounds before her disappearance was discovered by the guards. As they ran, Christina glanced back at the heavy door, realizing it was the same barrier she had been too weak to pass through in the past. A solemn silence fell between them as the weight of her departure finally settled on her shoulders. Iroh broke the quiet by asking if she was worried about leaving Muriel behind, knowing the complicated bond between the sisters. Christina walked ahead without stopping, admitting that while she was concerned, she knew she had to prioritize her own survival. She steeled her heart, deciding that the rest was now up to Muriel and that she could no longer protect her sister from everything. Back at the estate, Muriel stared at the silent bird in its cage, recalling the prince's words about its beautiful and unique voice. She leaned her chin on her hands, whispering to the swallow and asking why it refused to sing for her. The room felt emptier than before as Muriel sighed, muttering that if the bird wouldn't sing, there was no point in having it at all. Meanwhile, Christina arrived safely at the royal palace, where she was warmly greeted by the staff who apologized for the late hour. Turning to Iroh, she thanked him sincerely for the escort, but he simply smiled and insisted no thanks were necessary. He squeezed her hand gently, advising her to get some good rest tonight so they could talk at length when things calmed down. As Iroh left, Crown Princess Freya approached with a knowing grin, teasing Christina about how close she and the prince had become. Freya's expression turned serious as she noticed Christina's distress, asking softly if something terrible had happened at her family home. Upon hearing the story, Freya slammed her teacup down, shouting that it was unforgivable for a future princess to be treated like a prisoner. She offered to have the king protest the injustice, but Christina shook her head, explaining that her father would never listen to reason. Christina clarified that her father placed his pride and dignity above all else and would do reckless, unimaginable things if provoked. Freya pulled Christina into a tight hug, lamenting that a girl of only 15 should never have to carry such heavy burdens. She whispered that although she lived freely now, she felt 18 internally, implying she understood the forced maturity Christina was experiencing. Christina looked up in surprise, asking if Freya had also faced similar struggles as a princess in her own kingdom. Freya nodded with a distant look, revealing that her mother had been an incredibly strict woman who allowed no freedom. She admitted that she didn't truly understand her parents' nature until she got married and finally put some distance between them. Breaking the tension, Freya winked and claimed she only shared that secret because Christina would soon be her beloved sister-in-law. Christina clenched her fists in her lap, declaring that she wanted to stand on her own and be free from her father's control forever. Blushing slightly, she confessed her true desire was simply to live the way she chose, even if it sounded selfish. She looked at Freya with hesitation, asking timidly if the crown princess would laugh at such a simple dream. Freya smiled gently, assuring her she would never laugh at something so fundamental and important to Christina's happiness. The conversation shifted to their shared passions, with Freya noting that even the queen sought fulfillment in work like building orphanages. Freya explained that thanks to the queen's insistence that poor areas needed help most, orphanages were finally being built across the land. Freya elaborated on her work assisting the queen, explaining that she was pushing for new policies specifically designed to protect orphans. Turning to Christina with a warm smile, Freya encouraged her to find her own passion, insisting it didn't have to be politics. Christina touched the beads on her wrist, tentatively suggesting that perhaps she could try selling bracelets like the one she made. Freya gently pointed out the flaw in the plan, noting that noblewomen already possessed fine jewelry and wouldn't have much demand for it. Christina conceded the point, realizing that such simple beadwork would likely only appeal to commoners who needed practical items. Freya clapped her hands to shift the mood, declaring that she would focus on the success of the upcoming music recital before worrying about business. With a dramatic flourish, Freya revealed the surprise guest performer would be none other than the continent's most famous pianist, Lorenz Weidinger. She looked at Christina expectantly, confused by the girl's complete lack of reaction to such a wildly popular celebrity name. Freya gushed about Lorenz's genius, explaining how he had been famous since age 10 and active in high society across several countries. Internally, Christina grimaced, recalling from her previous life that Lorenz was a man who only had eyes for Iroh and was generally trouble. She remembered that his notorious scandals with noble ladies began exactly around this time, 3 years prior to the current timeline. Christina clenched her fist in determination, vowing to avoid getting entangled in his romantic messes at all costs. Later, the noble ladies chatted in the parlor, lamenting that Prince Iroh would be unable to attend the recital due to his busy schedule. Christina nodded politely, hiding her own disappointment while hoping that Iroh wasn't overworking himself on his inspection mission. Elsewhere, a carriage rattled violently over a rough country road, carrying a very different set of passengers. A sharp-tongued woman scolded the man lying on the grass, warning him not to relax too much because Count Groli was waiting in the capital. Lorenz covered his face with a book, complaining that the carriage ride had made him dizzy and teasing his handler for being a daughter of a baron. She snapped back, reminding him that he was the one who refused a luxury carriage from the Count to arrange his own transportation. Lorenz waved her off dismissively as she barked that they had exactly 10 minutes before they had to leave again. He grumbled about returning to his dreadful hometown, prompting his handler to scold him for speaking so rudely in front of royalty. Ignoring her, Lorenz sat up and showed her a book on business management he had recently found in a library in the capital. He explained that since his family wasn't wealthy, he needed to think about starting a new line of work to support them. Lorenz smiled thoughtfully, admitting to his confused companion that he had learned a great deal from someone he happened to meet in that library. Panic spread among the staff as they announced that Lorenz Weidinger had gone missing on the very day of the music concert. Crown Princess Freya turned pale with shock, disbelief coloring her voice as she repeated the disastrous news. The servants explained that although he arrived with Count Groli, he vanished from the waiting room and was nowhere to be found. Christina stepped forward immediately, offering to search for him so the hosts wouldn't be troubled further. She reassured the worried princess that with Lucien and Karl accompanying her, she would be perfectly safe during the search. Relieved, Freya entrusted the task to her, admitting that she and Prince Renat were completely occupied with receiving guests. Christina bowed and departed, internally swearing that she would find the pianist while keeping her personal contact with him to an absolute minimum. She deduced that since the Gratulasian Hall was right next to the royal palace, he couldn't have gone far given the logistics of the event. Reasoning that his fame made it impossible for him to walk publicly without causing a stir, she realized he must be hiding somewhere secluded. Christina directed her guards toward the back corridor, suspecting the quiet path would be the perfect hiding spot for someone trying to escape. Karl stepped closer with a stern expression, warning Lady Christina not to stray too far from his protection. As she walked, Christina's mind drifted to the rumor that her father had been placed under house arrest following a confrontation with the king. She glanced at Karl, grateful that Prince Irel had appointed the potential royal knight to guard her given the dangerous political climate. Following voices to a garden, they discovered Lorenz sitting on a rock while a young woman scolded him for his selfishness. Lorenz ignored her pleas, whining that he hated luxurious places and demanded to stay at her humble home instead. The woman snapped back that she wasn't going back and urged him to return to the concert hall where everyone was worried. Lorenz curled up stubbornly, muttering that he hoped the entire concert would just get cancelled so he could sleep. The woman sensed an intruder and shouted, "Who are you?" before realizing she was yelling at a noblewoman. Christina stepped into the light with a graceful smile, introducing herself formally to the erratic pianist. She informed him she was an organizer and politely suggested that it was time he stopped playing games and got ready. Christina added pressure by reminding him that a massive audience was already waiting for his appearance. Karl and the woman joined the silent pressure, looming over the pianist until he finally resigned himself to his duty. Lorenz shot a glare at his companion, whispering furiously that he would only go if she let him stay at her place later. Christina ignored the bickering and turned to the woman, asking if she was indeed Miss Greta. The woman curtsied, introducing herself as Greta Staubitz, the daughter of a baron, and admitted she had planned to watch from the back. She bowed her head deeply, apologizing profusely for Lorenz's inappropriate behavior and rudeness. Christina smiled and made a stunning counteroffer, suggesting that both of them should simply spend the night at the royal palace. Inside the hall, the murmurs of the impatient audience grew louder as anticipation filled the air. The curtain rose and Lorenz struck the keys, his frivolous demeanor vanishing the instant the music began. The audience sat spellbound, captured completely by the breathtaking melody flowing from his fingers. The last note faded into the silence of the hall, followed by Lorenz bowing deeply to the thunderous applause that erupted. Christina watched from the wings, marveling that the man who had been whining moments ago now stood on stage with such commanding confidence. She hurried to meet them as they exited, but Lorenz walked past with a distant look, his stage persona dropping instantly. Greta explained that she and Lorenz were childhood friends who grew up together in the same poor district of the capital. She revealed that while her mother married a baron, Lorenz's father had him adopted into a noble family solely to cultivate his musical talent. Greta sighed that despite their new positions, Lorenz still acted like a child, though Christina suggested he simply wanted to be near her. Christina wondered privately if there was a romantic history between them, but graciously thanked them for the invitation to stay at the palace. She couldn't help but question why, if Lorenz cared for Greta, he maintained such a notorious reputation with other women. The conversation shifted as Greta realized Christina's identity, asking if she was the sister of Lord Seamus O'Flaherty. Greta smiled fondly, revealing that Lord Seamus had helped her greatly in the past and even tutored her on occasion. Lorenz immediately stiffened at the name, interrupting to ask sharply if Greta was the young lady Seamus had mentioned recently. He leaned in with intense jealousy, demanding to know exactly what Seamus had told her and why they were discussing him. Christina tried to diffuse the tension by complimenting Lorenz's performance, but he barely acknowledged the praise in his agitated state. The scene shifted to the grand reception hall, where the air buzzed with the excitement of the post-concert celebration. A flamboyant noble approached with open arms, gushing loudly that Lorenz's performance had been absolutely incredible. Christina watched as the crowd swarmed the pianist, realizing that Count Groli would keep him occupied for quite some time. Scanning the room later, she noticed Lorenz had vanished from the crowd and was likely hiding somewhere outside the hall. She walked toward the quiet terrace, the noise of the party fading as she approached the stone balustrade. To her surprise, she found Seamus standing on the balcony with Greta, both looking startled by the unexpected encounter. Christina spotted Lorenz hiding behind a pillar eavesdropping, and when she caught him, he awkwardly tried to discuss a business book to cover his tracks. On the balcony, Seamus confessed to Greta that being with her gave him a strong drive to move forward in his life. Greta lowered her eyes shyly, insisting that she was the one who owed him everything for his constant support. From his hiding spot, Lorenz clenched his fists, muttering bitterly that it was clear he didn't stand a chance against a man like Seamus. He walked away with a heavy heart, telling himself that persistence might still work since Greta was the only one who never used him for his fame. His mind flashed back to a painful memory where Greta asked if she was just another conquest to satisfy his desires. Lorenz grimaced as he recalled her harsh words, noting that she was the only noble lady who dared to speak to him with such brutal honesty. The memory ended with her stinging accusation that he only chased her because he knew he could never actually have her. Back in the corridor, Lorenz stopped pacing and admitted to Christina that he had planned to give a gift to Greta tonight. He pulled out a blue beaded bracelet, explaining that the color represented health and he hoped it would bring her comfort. Christina recognized the handiwork immediately as her own product, while Lorenz finally connected the dots that she was the prince's fiancée. Lorenz let out a self-deprecating laugh, realizing he had a tragic habit of falling for people who would never return his affections. Shaking off the melancholy, he called out to Carl and the others, urging them to get moving before the cold settled in. The carriage rumbled away, leaving the snowy peaks of the mountain range standing silent and imposing in the distance. Elsewhere, a solemn burial ritual was interrupted as the attendees gasped in horror when their ceremonial torches flickered and died. Panic began to spread among the mourners, for the sacred laws dictated that without fire, the burial ritual could not be performed. A hushed silence fell over the crowd as Prince Irol suddenly appeared, recognized immediately by the villagers from his previous visit. With a gentle expression, Irol apologized for the intrusion and humbly asked if he might be allowed to join them in prayer. After the ritual, Irol noted the somber expressions of the elders, correctly guessing that they still hadn't found the Holy One. The village elder confirmed they were struggling, as their only clue was that the savior would carry the legendary Stone of Protection. She explained the ancient prophecy, stating that only when the stone and the Holy One unite would the power to expel evil emerge. Her face grew grave as she reasoned that since the evil still plagued the land, the stone and its master must currently be separated. Turning her gaze to the prince, the elder declared that he was the key, citing the miraculous ignition of the ritual fire upon his entry. She pressed him gently, suggesting that the divine presence she felt meant he likely already knew the identity of the Holy One. The elder stared into the fire, her voice dropping to a whisper as she admitted there was just one final thing she needed to ask. She asked if the Holy One would face mortal danger, solemnly charging Irol with the absolute duty of protecting her life. Irol's thoughts drifted to Christina, acknowledging that she had always been the most precious person to him, both in the past and now. The elder left him with a final prophecy, vowing that the love he received would be his shield, and the love he gave would become his sword. Seamus turned to look back at the garden path, asking his sister quietly about her earlier meeting with Miss Greta. He explained that since he didn't have a fiancée yet, he was simply curious to know why the two of them were keeping their close friendship a secret. His expression darkened as he admitted that in the end, he would be forced into a political marriage chosen by his family regardless of his feelings. Seamus abruptly cut himself off, shaking his head and telling Christina to forget he had said anything at all. He clarified that his relationship with Greta was casual, noting they only met occasionally after running into each other at a city library. Seamus decided to return to the academy immediately, leaving Christina with the distinct impression that there was much more to the story than he was admitting. Christina rushed back to the terrace, asking the blushing Greta if her brother had already departed for the school. Greta looked down at her hands, revealing that Lorenz had actually confessed his feelings to her the previous night and apologized for his past behavior. Christina listened in shock as Greta recounted how the pianist had humbly asked for forgiveness for always being selfish and burdensome. A heavy silence fell as Greta concluded that Lorenz would be fine without her, leaving Christina to realize the pianist's love was tragically unrequited. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the waiting room was chaotic as noble ladies squealed in delight over Lorenz's charming presence. The women surrounded him, praising his performance and asking if he was always this flirtatious and charismatic. From the sidelines, observers whispered about his sudden mood shift, wondering if all male artists were this emotionally volatile. Lorenz proudly displayed the blue beaded bracelet on his wrist, telling the admirers it was a precious gift from an acquaintance. He smiled softly, admitting that he had grown quite fond of the accessory and had decided to wear it all the time. The ladies swooned over the sentiment, remarking that the simple jewelry suited him perfectly and wishing they had one too. As the carriage arrived, Christina and Greta approached to bid him farewell, reminding him to take care of his health during his travels. Lorenz turned to Greta one last time, murmuring that she was still exactly the same honest person she had been in the past. He promised to play the piano for her again someday, suggesting it would be wonderful if she could visit the Koji Empire next time. Greta laughed off the comment as mere flattery, unaware of the weight behind his words, but curtsied and said it would be an honor. Later, Greta asked Christina about the large new opera house that had supposedly opened recently in the Empire. Lorenz froze in confusion, his smile dropping as he asked her to repeat what she had just said. He stated flatly that no such building existed and that the current emperor actually despised opera, making the story impossible. Christina frowned, confirming that she hadn't heard any news of a new opera house either despite her political connections. Greta waved her hands nervously, assuming she must have misunderstood, but Christina pressed her to reveal who had given her that information. As the carriage rolled away, Greta wondered if Count Driscoll had lied to her, since the imperial pianist himself knew nothing about it. A chill ran through her as she questioned why a high-ranking noble would invent such a specific lie for no apparent reason. Meanwhile, at the O'Flaherty estate, the iron gates swung open to welcome a carriage bearing an unexpected visitor. Countess Galahar stepped out in a magnificent dress, apologizing to Duke Owen for the sudden and unannounced intrusion. The Duke sneered that he preferred mature conversation over children's entertainment, dismissing the concert she had just attended with utter contempt. Countess Galahar introduced Miss Sasha MacGonner, the Viscount's daughter, as the perfect candidate to serve as Muriel's private tutor given her expertise in etiquette. Duke Owen beamed with relief, thanking the ladies profusely for offering their assistance during his estate's severe staffing crisis. The Countess dismissed his gratitude with a charming smile, insisting that simply being of help to him was reward enough. Owen watched them with a dark satisfaction, thinking that everything was proceeding exactly as he had anticipated. He internally gloated that he was a natural leader, the kind of man whom others instinctively flocked to assist whenever trouble arose. Galahar then introduced her male companion, presenting Count Aranan Driscoll from the Koji Empire as another distinguished guest. Aranan smiled smoothly, mentioning that he had recently met Lady Christina and was honored to now meet the Duke. He flattered Owen by claiming he had insisted on this meeting because a father of such a stunning lady must be even more remarkable. The Duke stiffened slightly, his expression faltering for a split second at the mention of Christina before he could recover. Aranan pressed on with a knowing grin, asking if it was true that the Duke had another daughter named Muriel. Regaining his composure, Owen confirmed with a smirk that yes, his younger daughter Muriel was indeed part of the family. Aranan leaned in with a conspiratorial whisper, revealing that he believed Muriel, not Christina, was the truly special one. When the Duke asked for clarification, Aranan pulled back with a mysterious smile, refusing to disclose his source even to him. The Countess steered the conversation to the Duke's house arrest, offering sympathy while dismissing it as a temporary inconvenience. Owen laughed off the punishment, arrogantly claiming that he had been lucky since birth and things always naturally worked out for him. Aranan watched the display with cold eyes, murmuring under his breath that he once knew a man who relied on luck just like the Duke. He raised his glass to interrupt the moment, proposing a toast to their splendid meeting and future cooperation. The group clinked glasses, drinking to the supposedly bright future of the O'Flaherty family while hidden agendas swirled in the air. Elsewhere at a cafe, Christina remarked that Princess Freya would love this place, while Greta sipped her tea in elegant silence. Greta's eyes sparkled with delight as she tasted the sweets, admitting it was her first time visiting a shop in the downtown district. A tear pricked her eye as she whispered that going out on a simple outing like this was far more fun than she had ever imagined. The scene flashed back to Aranan trying to dissuade them, only for Christina to insist on joining the mission to find a gift for Lady Lisa. Christina had wiped away tears of laughter, dragging the reluctant Count along by declaring they were all on an official mission together. Aranan smiled at the memory, explaining that he needed to buy gifts for the court and that it was important for Christina to bond with girls her age. Back in the present, Christina observed the cafe's layout, noting that hurried customers sat outside while those seeking peace sat indoors. She smiled at Greta, appreciating how this physical separation created a comfortable and quiet atmosphere for their private conversation. Christina looked at the menu, recalling how she had initially worried about how to find a suitable gift for a prince in a common city shop. She thanked Greta warmly, realizing that asking for her guidance in navigating the city had been the perfect decision. Greta hesitated, asking anxiously if Christina was truly sure about buying a commoner's gift for a crown prince of another country. Christina reassured her, surmising that Lady Lisa wanted to choose the gift herself to infuse it with personal love rather than relying on merchants. Greta pumped her fists with enthusiasm, declaring that she would give her full support if she could be of any help at all. Christina revealed that her brother Seamus had spoken highly of Greta, describing her as someone truly dependable. Blushing furiously, Greta stammered in surprise, unable to believe that Lord Seamus would say such things about her. Christina continued the praise, recounting how Seamus admired her self-taught knowledge of economics and called her amazing. Overwhelmed by the compliments, Greta covered her mouth and stuttered a heartfelt thank you. Christina shifted the topic with a curious smile, asking suddenly if Miss Greta currently had a fiancé. When Greta denied it, Christina pressed further, asking if she at least had an image of her ideal partner. Greta's expression softened as she began to speak, revealing that her ideal was based on her mother's experience. She explained that her parents met by chance in a cafe like this, allowing their feelings to grow quietly over time. Greta confessed that she too wished to be with a man she knew well and who truly knew her in return. She described a serious man who might seem distant but was actually kind-hearted, causing Christina to realize she was describing a specific person. Christina glanced at the clock, noting with concern that it had been a long time since their scheduled meeting with Lady Lisa. A maid burst into the room, apologizing for the interruption as she rushed toward their table. The servant from the O'Connell family bowed, announcing gravely that Lady Lisa would be unable to attend the gathering. Christina's face fell in shock as the maid revealed that Lisa had been involved in an accident and was injured. The maids whispered excitedly in the hallway, noting how cheerful the atmosphere had become since the arrival of the new tutor, Lady Sasha. Thomas adjusted his monocle with a satisfied smile, pleased to hear that the troublesome charge was finally getting along with someone. He pushed the tea cart silently toward the door, preparing to observe the study session for himself. Thomas entered the room with a polite bow, asking how the studies were progressing as he prepared to serve fresh tea. Muriel beamed with confidence, bragging to her tutor that the problems were incredibly easy and posed no challenge at all. Thomas watched in shock as Sasha praised Muriel as a true genius, claiming that even Lady Christina couldn't solve such problems. Muriel laughed mockingly, sneering that her sister tried to act capable but was actually incompetent compared to her own brilliance. She declared arrogantly that once she debuted in society, she would easily eclipse her sister and become the true center of attention. Thomas glanced down at the open textbook, expecting to see advanced equations that justified such high praise. His eyes narrowed as he realized the content was shockingly simple, consisting of elementary problems Muriel should have mastered years ago. Sweating nervously, he wondered if the Viscount's daughter was genuinely unaware that she was teaching a teenager the curriculum of a small child. Thomas poured the tea with a practiced hand, questioning internally if this sycophantic tutor had any intention of actually teaching. Sasha fawned over Muriel's golden hair, offering to style it while ignoring the lesson completely to stroke the girl's ego. She asked if Muriel inherited such beauty from her mother, causing the girl to blush and agree with a shy smile. Muriel proudly explained that her mother was originally a maid to Christina's mother but won the Duke's heart through her kindness and beauty. Sasha's expression tightened imperceptibly as she asked if Muriel's mother had been by Christina's side when the eldest daughter was born. Muriel looked confused by the specific question, dismissing it carelessly since she hadn't even been born at that time. Sasha slammed the hairbrush down with sudden violence, ordering Muriel to stop talking about her sister because it ruined her good mood. Meanwhile, a man picked up a forgotten ledger, only for Christina to rush forward and claim the book as her own. Christina smiled proudly, explaining that she had always been good with numbers and had learned accounting from her brother Seamus. The man looked intrigued, asking if she planned to start a business using the prestigious influence of the Duke's family name. The scene shifted to the O'Connell estate, where Christina and Greta rushed in to check on Lady Lisa after hearing about her accident. Lisa sat elegantly on the sofa, assuring her worried guests that despite the dramatic report, she hadn't received a single scratch. Greta marveled at the grandeur of one of the 4 great houses, while Christina questioned why Lisa was confined if she was unhurt. Blushing with embarrassment, Lisa confessed that the only injury she sustained was falling on her bottom from the shock of the incident. She laughed heartily at her own clumsiness, assuring them that since she could sit in a chair, there was absolutely nothing to worry about. Lisa's expression turned serious as she explained that the carriage horse had been spooked by a noise and the step had suddenly broken off. She recalled the terrifying moment, noting that she was only saved because the horse miraculously changed direction at the last second. Greta sighed in relief that Lisa had such good luck, but the lady's face remained clouded with a lingering suspicion. Lisa narrowed her eyes, murmuring that since the driver always checked for safety, it was incredibly strange that the step had broken so easily. Lisa recounted that although the investigation found no human tampering, the broken step had looked suspiciously rotten and decayed. She frowned deeply, questioning if it was truly possible for the royal carriage inspectors to overlook such a dangerous defect. Lisa touched her wrist gently, revealing her belief that the bracelet Christina had given her was the only reason she survived. She described the terrifying moment the horse charged, claiming that the bracelet suddenly emitted a blinding light just before impact. Lisa explained that the horse, terrified by the supernatural flash that no one else saw, violently swerved away at the last second. With sparkling eyes, she proposed that they make a similar protective bracelet for her fiancé, the Crown Prince of Drykalinic. Christina blinked in surprise, confirming that Lisa intended to give a handmade charm to such a high-ranking foreign royal. Greta panicked instantly, shouting that it was completely impossible for a commoner's amateur craft to be a suitable gift for a crown prince. Lisa dismissed the concern, insisting that regardless of its humble origins, she wanted it for its genuine protective power. Turning to Christina, Lisa added that the quality was actually excellent, praising the craftsmanship as anything but amateur. She pulled out a paper, amazed that the shopping list Christina provided earlier contained hidden gems that were just becoming famous. Lisa complimented Christina's refined taste and broad knowledge, noting that even the cafe she chose was exceptionally lovely. Christina flushed bright red, waving her hands and stammering that she didn't deserve such high praise for simple habits. Lisa smirked and turned to Greta, urging her to help convince their humble friend to accept the commission. Overwhelmed by their combined enthusiasm, Christina sighed and agreed to make the bracelet, unable to refuse their request. The nobleman holding the ledger stepped in, asking if Christina had truly decided to turn her hobby into a full-scale business. Christina explained that ever since Lorenz Weidinger started wearing her bracelet publicly, it had become the talk of the town. She revealed that reservation orders were pouring in daily, causing her immediate stock to sell out completely. Christina admitted that even with the help of Lucine and the palace servants, they had to temporarily suspend orders to catch up. Despite the exhaustion, she smiled warmly, stating that as long as people wanted them, she wanted to fulfill that desire. The nobleman observed her expression, noting that she seemed to have finally found a vocation that brought her genuine joy. Christina showed him the collection, explaining that there were many color variations available for customers to choose from. She pointed to the chart, detailing how red signified success in love while dark blue represented health and safety. The nobleman picked up a bead, correctly deducing that the raw materials were sourced directly from the O'Flaherty family lands. He smiled nostalgically and asked if she had seen Seamus lately, grumbling that boy hadn't visited him much recently. The nobleman noted that Seamus was reportedly getting serious about his work, actively traveling to the family lands to manage affairs personally. Christina explained she learned the craft from her mother during vacations, prompting the man to joke that Seamus's sister was much nicer than Prince Rena. She recalled her mother's specific instruction that the most crucial step in creating the bracelet was to begin with a prayer. Her mother taught her to feel deep gratitude for the blessings of heaven and earth and for the materials they were about to use. Christina remembered the final instruction to offer a heartfelt prayer that the wearer would be blessed with happiness. In the memory, her mother smiled gently, insisting that this spiritual step was mandatory before making a single knot. She promised that if Christina followed this rule, the accessory would transform into a truly wonderful bracelet. Christina reflected that her mother, who came from a lineage of clergy, had always been a deeply religious woman. A sudden realization struck Christina as she wondered if her mother's teachings held a literal power she hadn't understood. She stared at the beads, questioning if the prayers embedded in the bracelet were the actual force that saved Lady Lisa's life. Christina shook her head to dismiss the thought, telling herself it was impossible for a simple charm to have such supernatural effects. Meanwhile, in a flashback, Seamus arrived at the family estate where the tenants greeted him warmly as the young master. He immediately asked about the condition of the fish in the artificial pond, hoping for news of their recovery. Janarsh reported grimly that the fish were still refusing to eat and would soon die if the situation didn't change. He insisted that the water temperature and quality were perfect, leaving them baffled as to why the livestock was starving. Seamus reasoned that it couldn't be a disease since the death toll would be much higher, noting that their previous attempts with algae and barriers had failed. Refusing to give up, Seamus ordered them to keep experimenting with the new feedstock he had brought in the back carriage. He watched the workers unload the supplies, desperate to solve the issue before his father's isolation period ended. A supervisor suggested raising taxes to cover the losses, pointing out that the fish catch had dropped significantly. Seamus cut him off sharply, arguing that raising taxes when the people couldn't even pay their current dues was a foolish move. He warned that if they failed to ship the fish for the Christmas festival, the financial consequences would be catastrophic regardless of taxes. The supervisor glared at Seamus's back, thinking the young deputy was stubborn and impossible to reason with. Seamus walked away, recalling how he had always despised his father for making every decision based purely on emotion. He admitted to himself that he used to escape into the world of books just to forget the reality of the family he hated. A memory surfaced of his mother showing him the vast estate, marveling at the breathtaking scenery before them. She had smiled beneath her sun hat, telling him that one day he would be the one responsible for protecting this beautiful land. Seamus clenched his fist with renewed resolve, vowing that he would no longer run away from his duty or his past. Seamus recalled that his very first impression of the prince was simply that he was an annoying person. They greeted each other formally, acknowledging that they hadn't met since that day at the O'Flaherty estate. Seamus stared in disbelief, never imagining that in this fully residential academy, his roommate would be the second prince himself. He realized instantly that this assignment wasn't a coincidence but a calculated decision, making the academy's equal footing rule a mere facade. Seamus worried that if the prince turned out to be the overbearing type, no one would ever dare to oppose him. To his surprise, Iroh casually asked where he should put the books, disrupting Seamus's expectation of arrogance. Iroh smiled and offered to help unpack Seamus's things since he had already finished his own, leaving the young lord bewildered by his easygoing nature. Seamus noted that Iroh, despite being the son of a concubine, treated everyone with genuine kindness and zero discrimination. He mused that if Iroh were the crown prince, people would attribute this humility to confidence, but his current position made it complex. Iroh glanced at a letter, mentioning quietly that he heard his mother had been sick in the secondary palace lately. He admitted with a sad smile that she refused his visit, telling him to focus on his studies because she was a humble woman by nature. Iroh dropped his guard, confessing that beneath it all, he was actually afraid of everything and hated everything, to which Seamus muttered, "Same here." Seamus listened as Iroh mentioned viewing the world with unclouded eyes, a sentiment that struck a chord with his own conflicted feelings. Iroh laughed that he only tried to be a noble young man, because he thought that was the type Christina would like, deciding then to stop running away. Seamus asked him not to mock him, and the tension dissolved into laughter as they finally bonded over their shared struggles. Taking a bold step, Iroh asked Seamus directly what he truly thought of his own father. Seamus lied smoothly that he respected him, while Iroh admitted that was the complete opposite of how he felt about his own father. Internally, Seamus acknowledged the bitter truth that he could never respect his father, even if the sky were to fall. He realized with a heavy heart that the person stuck in place, unable to move forward, was actually himself. The memory shifted to the library, where Greta had once excitedly recommended a novel she couldn't stop reading. She had panicked and apologized profusely, embarrassed for blurting out her opinion to a noble so casually. Seamus smiled at the memory, telling her he had read the book on empire management she recommended and found it truly enjoyable. Her eyes lit up with joy when he asked for more recommendations, sparking a friendship built on shared intellect. The scene transitioned to a sunny terrace, where they sat together discussing their futures over tea. Greta confessed her dream was to start her own business to support her family and prove herself, impressing Seamus with her noble goal. She asked innocently if he wasn't supposed to simply inherit his family's dukedom, questioning why he needed to prove anything. Seamus looked at her, thinking that he used to believe the right person for Christina was someone strong and independent like Greta. He smiled wistfully, wondering if he could ever become that kind of person himself. A knock on the door shattered the memory, and the servant announced that dinner was ready. Seamus stood up slowly, realizing he had been lost in an old dream that filled him with a painful nostalgia. Seamus reflected on the quiet, unspoken bond between Iroh and Christina, realizing it was a connection only they could truly understand. Iroh broke the silence with a hesitant question, admitting he didn't know why he suddenly felt a certain way. The maid politely refused the extra food, but Seamus insisted she take the fruit home for her sick husband. She accepted his offer with a grateful smile as Seamus noted he wouldn't be able to finish it alone anyway. Seamus recognized her as Muriel's former maid, noting how much kinder and calmer she had become since leaving the capital. The maid revealed that Lady Christina had introduced her to this estate after she was dismissed for being useless to Muriel. Seamus admitted he didn't know what caused the change, but noted that even Christina herself had changed quite suddenly. The maid teased that noble ladies wouldn't leave the more wonderful Lord Seamus alone, though he simply hoped for peace. A large fish leaped energetically from the water, splashing droplets that sparkled in the sunlight. The workers cheered in unison as the fish jumped, celebrating the visible proof of life returning to the pond. Yanarsh praised Seamus for the recovery, though Seamus watched the water with a thoughtful expression. Watching the fish swim vigorously, Seamus questioned if the food change was the cause or if the sudden recovery was truly a miracle. He murmured to himself that they never actually figured out the true reason for the livestock's revival. Yanarsh mentioned the elders believed the decline happened because they skipped the harvest festival, though Seamus remained skeptical. A worker explained that the Lord had cancelled the festival years ago, deeming it useless, shocking Seamus, who thought it was annual. Seamus commanded them to bring the festival back this year, declaring that giving thanks to the gods was important. He assigned the preparations to Yanarsh, stating he would take personal responsibility for convincing his father. Seamus admitted internally that talking to his father might be pointless, but he knew they had no choice but to try. The view shifted to a distant landscape where dark clouds began to gather over the mountain range. Prince Iroh mumbled in his sleep that he wanted to see Christina, his head resting heavily on his arms. Brian watched his master nap, noting with a smile that the prince really did love Lady Christina deeply. Iroh woke up and cancelled the next day's village visit, proposing they return to the capital temporarily instead. The village elder's face appeared in his mind, her expression grim as she sensed the disturbance in the land. Iroh's expression hardened as he declared there was no time to waste on relaxation given the urgency of the situation. Brian bowed faithfully, vowing to stay by the prince's side and accompany him to the very end no matter what happened. A scout reported to the prince that the number of animals this year was indeed lower than usual, confirming their suspicions. He added grimly that the number of weak and sickly animals had increased significantly in the forest. Brian noted that even the villagers felt something was definitely off, confirming the unnatural state of the region. Iroh was relieved to hear they decided to hold a festival to pray, hoping it would help appease the unrest. He revealed that they held rituals in the capital too after reporting to the king, but they hadn't seen any clear results yet. Iroh clenched his fists in the darkness, resolving that the only way to truly protect Christina was to force himself to stay away from her. He gazed out at the bleak landscape, wishing desperately for a decisive solution that could permanently eradicate the evil plaguing their world. A sudden sneeze broke his brooding silence, prompting Brian to ask with concern if his master was feeling the cold. Iroh brushed off the concern with a small smile, noting that they had truly entered the freezing depths of autumn. The chill in the air triggered a specific memory, reminding him that Christina had also recently come down with a fever. He recalled receiving the written report about her illness, the paper trembling slightly in his hand as he read the news. Brian panicked immediately upon hearing the details, but Iroh calmly reassured him that her condition wasn't life-threatening. Still anxious, Brian paced around the room, lamenting that Christina was the type who always pushed herself far beyond her limits. Trying to distract himself, Brian suddenly asked Iroh what exactly it was that he liked so much about his fiancée. Iroh paused, blinking in surprise as he realized that in all this time, no one had ever actually asked him that question before. A soft expression crossed his face as he looked down, searching for the right words to describe a feeling he had always kept private. He described how her violet eyes made him feel special and confident, explaining that she always listened to him with genuine excitement. Brian suggested that any noble lady would do the same, but Iroh laughed and insisted it was a completely different and unique connection. His mind drifted back to the day he visited her, recalling the specific moment that solidified his devotion. Iroh admitted that while she wasn't perfect, the way she constantly strove to become a better person was incredibly captivating. He smiled with determination, declaring that her resilience made him want to become a true source of strength for her. The sun began to rise over the distant mountains, casting a golden light on the path that would lead them back home. Inspired by her example, Iroh whispered to himself that perhaps it was time for him to change and grow as well. His eyes shone with a new resolve as he vowed that the very first thing he would do upon returning to the capital was see her. The servants cheered with enthusiasm as they gathered around the crates of colorful beads, signaling the start of their new task. Christina clenched her fists with excitement, announcing to the room that they were officially going to start mass-producing the bracelets. The maids celebrated the direct orders from Princess Freya, remarking that making jewelry was paradise compared to their usual boring palace chores. Christina bowed her head to apologize for the extra workload, but the staff quickly reassured her that they were genuinely happy to help. As they worked, the maids gossiped about the bracelet's popularity, surprising Christina, who hadn't realized how famous her hobby had become. One maid lamented that her friend Lada wanted the deep blue color to match Lord Lorenz, while noting that Nina had chosen red. The group giggled as they revealed that thanks to the red bracelet, Nina was now getting along famously with a handsome knight. Christina blinked in surprise as they shared the latest gossip about Nina getting close to a palace guard named Radek. A maid explained that Radek had suddenly approached Nina first while she was watching his training wearing the red charm. Christina smiled gently at the story, listening as they described how happy Nina was just to exchange a few words with him. Lada sighed with dramatic regret, muttering that she definitely should have chosen the red bracelet instead of the blue one. The conversation shifted to Lucine, with the maids teasing that if the beautiful head maid wore red, the entire palace guard would go into a frenzy. Lucine coolly dismissed the idea, causing Christina to join in the fun and ask if her stoic maid wouldn't like to try wearing red just once. Lucine touched her chin thoughtfully, admitting internally that if someone special ever caught her eye in the future, she might consider it. The light-hearted atmosphere vanished instantly as the heavy doors swung open to reveal a serious-looking Princess Freya. Freya got straight to business, asking Christina if she knew Miss Caroline from the Kriza family and Miss Liliana from the Herka family. Christina stood at attention and confirmed that she knew both of them were daughters of prominent count families. Freya explained that Caroline, desperate for social popularity, had recently requested and received a yellow bracelet just like Lady Lisa. She revealed that when Caroline fell down the stairs, the bracelet reportedly lit up and protected her from sustaining a single scratch. Freya's expression darkened as she contrasted this with Miss Liliana, who had not requested a bracelet and was involved in a carriage accident. Christina gasped as Freya confirmed that without the protection of a bracelet, Liliana had been seriously injured in the crash. Freya turned to her friend, suggesting that the frequency of these strange accidents targeting noble daughters was becoming suspiciously high. Christina touched her chest, admitting she was overjoyed that her creation saved a life, but Freya cut in with a serious warning. The princess insisted they couldn't just celebrate sales, expressing deep concern that the bracelet's magical ability was being forced to activate so often. Freya declared that they needed to consult Queen Louisa immediately and asked Christina to accompany her to the audience. Walking down the hall, Christina wondered if these events had occurred in her previous life without her ever knowing about them. A cold sweat ran down her cheek as she couldn't shake the overwhelming bad feeling that something dangerous was looming. They arrived at the Queen's chambers, the grand chandelier casting a solemn light over the heavy atmosphere of the room. Queen Louisa sat regally on her throne, asking directly if the bracelets Christina made possessed a mysterious power to save lives. Christina raised her hand to deny the accusation, stammering that she hadn't done any special processing or magic whatsoever. Queen Louisa smiles gently, telling Christina that she believes her denial about not intentionally adding magic. Louisa reveals that Iroh's frequent travels were actually to investigate suspicious incidents happening all over the kingdom. She explains that while these events look like ordinary accidents, the number of casualties is growing abnormally high. Louisa asks for Christina's help to distribute the protective bracelets to noble girls, specifically targeting the 15-year-old age group. Turning to Christina, the queen notes that she will be turning 16 soon and asks if she has noticed anything strange lately. Christina wonders if her returning in time was related to these events, but outwardly denies having any strange experiences herself. Princess Freya interrupts the conversation, addressing Her Majesty with a sudden urgent thought. Freya asks if it would be possible to distribute the bracelets to commoner girls as well, not just the nobility. The queen hesitates, noting that while welfare institutions could help, the sheer number of bracelets needed would be enormous. Queen Louisa agrees it is an excellent idea, acknowledging that the threat isn't limited to nobles only. Freya suggests asking the city's craftsmen for help, though she realizes the final prayer must still come from Christina. Louisa laughs softly, proposing they think of a way to reduce the number of manufacturing steps to finish as quickly as possible. The queen looks at Christina with nostalgia, remarking that she has come to resemble her mother Elvanina, especially when she looks down. She mentions Eva, Muriel's mother, noting that despite Eva becoming her husband's mistress, Elvanina never said a word against her. Louisa recalls that Eva was present at Christina's birth, lamenting that a rift eventually formed between the two women despite their closeness. The queen covers her eyes, admitting that her own relationships often ended in quarrels and separation, mirroring the tragedy of her friends. Christina and Freya gasp in alarm as the queen suddenly collapses from her chair onto the floor. Servants rush to help as Louisa claims she is just dizzy, while Freya asks a maid if the king is also unwell. Freya learns that the king is suffering from a mysterious cough with no known cause, deepening the worry in the palace. Meanwhile, Iroh visits his mother, Lady Meve, who is surprised by his rare appearance in her chambers. Meve asks what is wrong, while Iroh stands awkwardly by the door, unsure of how to begin. Meve assures him she is treated well and turns the question back to him, asking if he is ready for his upcoming graduation. Iroh smiles gently, recalling Christina's advice to meet the ones you long for while you still can. Meve teases him with a knowing look, asking if he is still in a romantic relationship with Miss Christina. She urges him to always remain on Christina's side, warning that there will be many obstacles ahead for them. Later, Iroh sits with the crown prince, reporting that his mother was doing better than he expected. Iroh confirms she is still a bit cold, but he plans to visit again, relieved by her improved condition. Crown Prince Rana asks Iroh why he called him to this specific location using a secret code to avoid prying eyes. Iroh looks up at the shelves, reminiscing about how they used to hide here from their tutors during childhood. Rana sighs, admitting he never imagined the first thing he'd learn from his brother would be something like this. Crown Prince Rana turned to his brother with a serious expression, discussing the concerning military movements in the neighboring kingdom of Dunfort. He explained that the king of Dunfort was deliberately stalling the succession, forcing his 3 sons to tear each other apart for the throne. Rana revealed that the cunning minister had sided with the 3rd prince, giving that faction the upper hand in the brutal power struggle. He grimly deduced that the 3rd prince intended to wage war against their kingdom solely to demonstrate his strength to his rivals. With their own father bedridden, Rana declared his immediate plan to strengthen the border defenses before the enemy could strike. Iroh felt a chill run down his spine, realizing that Ludmila's prophecy about war breaking out when evil spreads was coming true. He informed Rana that the queen had also collapsed, though the prince insisted it was just a mild cold despite the king's similar condition. A heavy silence fell as they realized everyone was falling ill, prompting Rana to announce an emergency council of nobles for tomorrow. Rana dropped the news that Duke O'Flaherty's house arrest had been lifted, meaning Christina's father would return to power at the council. He looked at Iroh with confusion, asking why his brother hadn't visited Christina today given the increasingly dangerous political climate. Iroh explained that she wanted to rest, while Rana warned him that Dunfort's spies might be lurking in the shadows alongside the Duke. Rana voiced his deepest fear, questioning if the enemy kingdom already knew who the legendary saintess was and were hunting her. Iroh clenched his hand over his heart, vowing that if Christina was indeed the saintess, he would never let anyone lay a hand on her. Christina walked through the palace gardens, savoring the rare moment of peace after a long period of frantic work. She breathed in the fresh air, feeling a sense of relief knowing that the first batch of protective bracelets was finally complete. Her thoughts drifted to the recipients, hoping desperately that her creations would be enough to protect everyone from the coming danger. A man's voice interrupted her stroll, calling out to ask if she was indeed Lady Christina. She stopped and turned, her guard going up immediately as she recognized Count Driscoll standing on the path. Christina greeted him with a polite but icy smile, confirming that she remembered him perfectly well from their previous encounter. Driscoll glanced at her guards, smirking as he noted that she had gained quite a few attendants since they last met. He laughed loudly when she didn't respond to his taunt, amused by her sharp and defensive attitude. Christina stared at him, confirming her internal suspicion that she felt a deep, instinctive discomfort around this man. She decided to seize control of the conversation, asking pointedly if the Count was perhaps feeling tired. Driscoll's smile faltered slightly as he admitted he was exhausted, muttering that he had far less time than he expected. He looked at her with a strange expression, describing himself as nothing more than a temporary existence. Christina frowned, confused by the ominous phrasing, and asked him to explain exactly what he meant. He ignored the question and switched topics, accusing her directly of being the one who was actually making the popular bracelets. Christina put on her best social smile, flatly denying the claim and insisting she wasn't the creator. Driscoll lowered his voice, warning that if she didn't keep it a secret, she would be crushed by the flood of requests. She maintained her lie that Lady Freya's artisans did the work, internally terrified that her father might hear the rumors. The Count narrowed his eyes, studying her face intently as he tried to find a crack in her composure. He stepped closer with a provocative grin, asking if she really expected him to believe her story. Before the guards could react, he took her hand, remarking that these beautiful fingers were obviously the ones doing the crafting. Her guards surged forward instantly, shouting at him to refrain from such insolent behavior toward the future princess. Driscoll let go, apologizing with a fake smile while internally screaming that their strict customs were absolutely disgusting. He played the fool, claiming that as a man from the countryside, he simply wasn't used to their formal greetings. Christina closed her eyes briefly, accepting the excuse with a cold, "I see," that conveyed zero trust. He immediately pivoted to an insult, remarking that her fiancé seemed rather narrow-minded to guard her so heavily. Christina's eyes snapped open with fury as she stated that insulting a member of the royal family was unforgivable. Driscoll leaned in, ignoring her anger, and whispered that surely she felt the need for a little more freedom. She stepped back, her voice shaking with rage as she warned him that she would not stay silent if he insulted His Highness again. He looked at her with a mix of revulsion and interest, thinking she was disgusting yet surprisingly brave at heart. Christina turned her back on him, declaring coldly that there was no point in talking to him any further. Christina spat out her disgust, declaring there was absolutely no point in continuing a conversation with such a vile man. She turned on her heel with a curt "excuse me," leaving him standing alone in the garden path. Driscoll watched her retreat with a calculating gaze, murmuring the second prince's name under his breath. A dark smile played on his lips as he internally categorized the prince as nothing more than an annoying obstacle. Christina returned to her friends looking pale, apologizing profusely as they rushed to support her trembling frame. She waved off their concern, lying that she was just feeling the sudden relief of finishing the first batch of bracelets. Desperate to change the subject, Christina brought up Countess Galahar's introduction of the new tutor Sasha and housekeeper Brigida. Her friend lowered her voice to gossip, revealing that the women had become disturbingly thin and were acting strange lately. The rumor mill suggested they had become obsessively attached to a certain count from the Empire, causing Christina to freeze in realization. Meanwhile, at the Galahar summer estate, Driscoll looked down at his servants with cold contempt, calling them all completely useless. He glared at the woman standing before him, stating flatly that she and the others had failed to learn anything of value. His demeanor shifted instantly to a chilling gentleness as he held her, telling Caitlin not to be afraid while she trembled. Driscoll reminded her softly that she had previously expressed a desire to meet Polly, the Queen's personal maid. He commanded her to look into his eyes, forcing her to recite the name, Alana, in a trance-like state. At the O'Flaherty estate, the Duke sat listlessly at tea, murmuring that the time to leave was drawing near. Muriel gasped in terror as she accidentally spilled tea, screaming an apology and bracing herself for his usual explosive rage. To her shock, he simply sat there with a hollow expression, leaving her to wonder if he was suffering from a serious illness. She realized with a shiver that her once fearsome father seemed to have completely lost his energy and his will to live. A servant announced the arrival of the procession, but the Duke remained distracted, staring blankly into space. The gates swung open to reveal Count Driscoll, who announced he had come to escort the Duke to the Council of Elders. Driscoll stepped out of the carriage with a flourish, introducing himself formally as Aranan Driscoll. The Duke lifelessly introduced Muriel as his youngest daughter, ordering her to greet their guest properly. Driscoll leered at her with an unsettling smile, praising her loveliness while Muriel stammered her introduction. Muriel stared back at him with intense suspicion, wondering what on earth her father had to do with such a creepy man. Driscoll laughed off her rude stare, telling the apologizing Duke that it was fine for a child to be herself. His eyes suddenly locked onto her wrist, asking sharply where she had obtained such a beautiful bracelet. Muriel turned away in disgust, ignoring his question while her father apologized again for her lack of manners. She walked away confused, unable to understand why her father would associate with someone who gave her such bad vibes. Passing a room, Muriel peeked through the crack in the door and was horrified to see Brigitta rummaging through her private things. She watched as Brigitta reached for the accessory box, only for the woman to be blasted back by a sudden shock, screaming in pain. Muriel caught Brigitta red-handed rummaging through her wardrobe and demanded to know what on earth she was doing. Brigitta jumped in fright and stammered a clumsy excuse, lying that she was merely tidying up the young lady's clothes. As the housekeeper hurried away apologizing, Muriel noticed with horror that the woman's hand was bright red and looked painfully burned. Brigitta rushed out of the room in a panic, desperate to escape before she could be questioned further about the injury. A strange, high-pitched ringing sound lingered in the air, marking the aftermath of the magical defense mechanism. The room fell silent as Muriel stared at the accessory box, the soft clink of the lid settling amplifying her unease. The scene shifted to the royal palace, where King Fergal O'Toole III convened a solemn meeting of the Council of Elders. The king addressed the assembly with a grave expression, citing the many strange disturbances plaguing the country recently. He invoked history to explain the threat, asking the elders if they remembered the legend of Lady Sheila. The nobles murmured in shock, recalling the queen's sister from generations ago who was said to have prevented the Great Samoft War. King Fergal declared that just like in Sheila's time, evil had begun to creep in again and they must find the saint immediately. Skeptical whispers broke out as some nobles argued that the war was just a failed invasion and questioned if this was merely a church matter. The king turned to the bishop for answers, but the cleric admitted they had absolutely no information regarding the saint's appearance. Ignoring the doubts, the king ordered an urgent search, declaring that they could not afford to wait a moment longer. His voice trembled with suppressed fear as he voiced the terrifying possibility that the ancient evil had already taken root. A heavy dread descended upon the council chamber, leaving the king's unfinished question hanging ominously in the silence. Freya apologized for keeping Christina so busy with work, noting that she likely hadn't even had time to meet Prince Iroh yet. Christina smiled reassurance, insisting that it wasn't proper for a crown princess to apologize for such matters since Iroh was busy as well. The conversation shifted to the upcoming graduation ceremony at the academy, where graduates personally invite their closest family and fiancés. Freya leaned in with a knowing smile, asking confidently if Iroh had already extended his invitation to her. Christina's face flushed red as she silently confirmed the invitation, unable to hide her delight. Freya clapped her hands in excitement, revealing that the dress she had tailored specifically for Christina would finally have its moment to shine. She asked what Christina planned to give in return, prompting Christina to describe an accessory made with emeralds to match Iroh's eyes. Christina shyly admitted that Iroh had also given her a gift, revealing a pair of purple amethyst cufflinks that matched her own eyes. The delicate fabric of her dress rustled softly as she touched the gift, the anticipation of the event filling the quiet room. She imagined the perfect scene of them walking together, color-coordinated in outfits that reflected each other's eye colors. Blushing deeply, Christina whispered that she hoped that wonderful day would arrive as soon as possible. Freya teased her friend for turning so red, enjoying the rare sight of Christina being so openly romantic. They shared a warm smile, promising each other that they would do everything to make the ceremony absolutely wonderful. Meanwhile, at the royal council, a nobleman stepped forward and boldly declared that he had an idea of who the saint might be. The court erupted in shock as he turned to Duke O'Flaherty, asking if the rumors about his daughter were correct. The man smirked with supreme confidence, telling the king not to worry because he would handle the entire matter personally. He promised to reveal the saint's identity once the proper arrangements were made and the right time arrived. The king watched him with suspicion, wondering why this man was so certain and why Owen O'Flaherty was at the center of it. Back at the estate, Muriel stared in disbelief as the butler informed her that Sasha and Brigida were resigning immediately. The servant confirmed the news with a bow, stating that the decision was final and they were already preparing to leave. He explained that Sasha had sudden health issues and Brigida's hand burns refused to heal, leaving Muriel devastated by the loss. Sasha and Brigida entered the room to bid their formal farewells, their expressions unreadable as they faced their student. Desperate to make them stay, Muriel forced a bright smile and announced she would show them the fruits of their teaching. She shouted for Mary to immediately bring the mathematics book her brother Seamus had given her. Mary hurried over with the book, handing it to her mistress who was trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Muriel vowed to solve the problems effortlessly to prove their time wasn't wasted and convinced them to rescind their resignation. She opened the book only to freeze in horror, realizing that the equations on the page looked like complete gibberish to her. Panic set in as she recalled their empty praises about her genius, realizing that even Christina couldn't solve these basic problems. Muriel screamed at her tutors, demanding to know exactly what they had been teaching her all this time if she couldn't understand a thing. Sasha's friendly mask shattered into a cold glare as she lied smoothly that they were merely following Lady Christina's orders. Sasha sneered with cold condescension, stating that since Muriel wasn't fit for the duchy, there was never any need to teach her difficult lessons. The maid wept as she confessed that Sasha had threatened to spread shameful rumors about Muriel if she didn't obey. Sasha twisted the knife further, lying that Christina had been viciously bad-mouthing Muriel behind her back without a shred of mercy. Muriel froze in horror as the manipulation took hold, unable to believe that her beloved sister could be capable of such betrayal. The loyal servants tried to intervene, begging Muriel not to listen to the lies of the women who were clearly deceiving her. Mary shouted that Christina always cared for her, but Muriel clamped her hands over her ears and screamed at them to shut up. Muriel's mind raced with dark thoughts, convinced that Christina's kindness had been a mask to hide her cruel mockery. She exploded in a fit of rage, shouting that her own sister was a disgrace to their noble name for pretending to care. A memory of Christina surfaced, but Muriel's corrupted perspective now twisted her sister's concerned expression into one of deceit. Screaming that everything was a lie, Muriel rejected the truth completely as her heart hardened against the only person who truly loved her. Muriel stormed into her father's study without knocking, desperate to find an ally in the midst of her emotional turmoil. The Duke and his guest looked up in surprise, with her father coldly ordering her to mind her manners and greet the visitor first. Muriel stiffened as she recognized Count Driscoll, realizing too late that she had interrupted a serious conversation. She forced a clumsy curtsy, welcoming the Count who smiled at her with an unsettling mix of charm and calculation. Driscoll clapped his hands in delight, praising her as a gentle and wonderful girl who reflected the Duke's noble upbringing. The Duke smirked, comparing her favorable behavior to Christina's, claiming he only wanted to secure a good future for his youngest. His expression darkened as he declared that Christina had become excessively arrogant and unmanageable. Muriel blinked in confusion, shocked to hear her father speak so harshly of the sister who had always been perfect. The Duke lied smoothly, claiming he met Christina at the palace and was appalled by her haughty and condescending behavior. He added that she hid this true nature in front of him, leaving Muriel to wonder if her idolized sister was truly a fraud. A tense silence hung in the air as the weight of the Duke's deception pressed down on his confused daughter. Driscoll broke the quiet, suggesting that Christina's corruption stemmed from being apart from her father and proposing she be brought back home. The Duke looked intrigued when Driscoll used the specific word, retrain, asking what exactly he meant by that. Driscoll's eyes narrowed with malicious intent as he confirmed that a rigorous correction in manners was absolutely necessary. He argued that the royal court only cared about her engagement to the prince, but her reputation was becoming a liability. With a theatrical flair, Driscoll proposed the unthinkable: they should annul the engagement to solve the problem. He apologized for the rudeness but suggested that marrying her to a lower-ranked noble would teach her arrogant nose a harsh lesson. Leaning forward, Driscoll flattered the Duke as a national treasure, claiming he only wanted to protect Owen's spirit from being drained. The Duke hesitated, revealing that a strict agreement between the Queen and his late wife's family made breaking the engagement impossible. Driscoll pointed to the lineage chart, arguing cunningly that the agreement was truly about the family connection rather than the specific individual. Driscoll extended his hand into the darkness, murmuring that the solution to their dilemma was actually quite simple. He gestured invitingly toward Muriel, suggesting with a sly smile that there was already a girl far more fit for the role right here. Muriel's eyes widened in disbelief as the realization struck her that she could replace her sister as the second prince's fiancée. The Duke stared at his guest in shock, questioning if such a radical substitution was even remotely possible. Driscoll pressed his advantage, reminding Owen that he himself had admitted Muriel was the truly special child, not Christina. He painted a seductive picture of the future, declaring it crystal clear that the gentle Muriel deserved the position over her arrogant sister. Muriel pressed a hand to her chest, her heart racing as she finally accepted the validation that she was indeed better than Christina. The Duke embraced his daughter warmly, affirming her delusion that she was the special one who truly deserved the royal engagement. The conspirators raised their wine glasses high, celebrating the decision to destroy Christina's future as if it were a glorious victory. Crystal chimed softly against crystal, the delicate sound sealing the dark pact between the father and the manipulator. They drank a toast to the broken engagement, cheering for Muriel's bright future while unknowingly dooming the House of O'Flaherty.